multiverse is a tapestry of infinite realities, each with its own immutable laws. But what happens when a thread from one universe tears through into another, bringing power that shouldn't exist? When punishment incarnate crosses into a world already damned, even hell holds its breath. London burned, not metaphorically, not in the poetic sense of crime or corruption. The East End was literally aflame with fire that burned wrong. Blue, white, and writhing, consuming brick and steel with hunger that transcended chemistry. The flames screamed. Buildings didn't collapse. They melted into slag that hissed with voices. And at the epicenter, idling on a motorcycle that reality itself seemed reluctant to acknowledge, sat a figure wrapped in hellfire and leather, and the skull was bare bone, wrapped in flames that leaked from empty eye sockets like tears of damnation. The leather jacket bore scorch marks that never quite burned through. Chain wrapped around one skeletal hand, links glowing cherry red, each designed to drag sinners to judgment. The motorcycle, chromed and impossible, sat perfectly still despite having no visible means of support, its engine purring with a sound like distant screaming. Johnny Blaze was gone. Only the rider remained. Zarathos, the spirit of vengeance bound within mortal flesh, tilted his flaming skull upward. The dimensional rift had closed minutes ago, sealing him in this alien reality. The transition had been violent. Ripped from pursuit of a soul trafficker in New Mexico and hurled through collapsing space into this. This world reeked of sin, not the usual human corruption the rider hunted. This was deeper, older. The very air tasted of blood and unholy communion, as if the boundary between the living and the damned had worn tissue thin. The rider's senses, attuned to evil across dimensions, lit up like nerve endings thrust into fire. Everywhere. The evil was everywhere. Ghouls stumbled from the ruins of a nearby warehouse. Corpses animated by vampiric corruption, their eyes vacant except for hunger. 17 of them, still wearing the tattered remains of dockworker uniforms. The rider didn't need to see their deaths to know they'd been victims, turned against their will into shambling predators. The chain uncoiled with a sound like rattling bones. One sweep. The hellfire wreath links passed through the ghouls like they were tissue paper, but instead of merely cutting them down, the supernatural flame ignited something deeper. The corpses didn't just fall. They burned from the inside out, their stolen animation immolating as the hellfire consumed the vampiric corruption, binding them to mockery of life. They screamed. Then they were ash. The rider's skull turned slowly, scanning the skyline. London. He recognized the architecture from Johnny's memories, but this version felt wrong. Colder. The darkness between streetlights seemed thicker, and his supernatural senses detected movement in that darkness, things that scattered from his hellfire's light like roaches. Vampires. Dozens of them. Not the tortured half-breeds or desperate unfortunates the rider occasionally encountered in his own dimension. These were organized. Hunting. A woman's scream cut through the night. The motorcycle roared to life without the rider touching any controls. Hellfire erupted from the exhaust pipes as the impossible machine launched forward, tires leaving burning tracks on pavement that shouldn't melt. The rider didn't follow streets. He carved his own path, the motorcycle defying gravity to climb a building's facade before launching across rooftops toward the sound of terror. 3 blocks away, in an alley that stank of blood and fear, a young woman pressed herself against brick while a figure in an SS uniform smiled with fangs too long for any human mouth. "The Reich rises again, Fräulein," the vampire hissed in accented English. "You should be honored to serve the new order." The rider's motorcycle hit the vampire like a meteor wrapped in hellfire. The impact cratered the alley wall. The vampire, artificial, the rider's senses told him, its corruption recent and technological somehow, shrieked as hellfire ate through its stolen flesh. It tried to regenerate, vampire blood bubbling and reforming, but the supernatural flame burned deeper than mere tissue. "Your soul is guilty." The rider's voice echoed from every shadow, layered with Zarathos's ancient rage. "Look into my eyes." The Penance Stare activated. The vampire's eyes locked with the rider's burning sockets, and every sin it had committed, every life taken, every scream ignored, every atrocity celebrated, came flooding back as lived experience. The artificial vampire had been human once, a willing volunteer for Millennium's freak program, and it had enjoyed every murder since transformation. The creature's scream reached frequencies that shattered windows. Its body convulsed, hellfire spreading from the inside as the Penance Stare forced it to experience its own evil. Unlike human criminals who collapsed broken but alive, the vampire's corrupted soul couldn't withstand the assault. It ignited from within, hellfire consuming the unholy animation. Ash. Just ash. The rider turned to the woman, who had collapsed against the wall, hyperventilating. She looked up at the flaming skull, at the motorcycle that still burned without consuming itself, at the chain that writhed like a living serpent of judgment. "Run," the rider commanded, voice like grinding tombstones. She ran. The rider stood alone in the alley, skeletal hands flexing as Zarathos processed what had just happened. The vampire had burned, yes. The Penance Stare had worked. But something felt wrong. The creature's soul had been corrupted willingly, embraced its damnation with open arms. The stare had destroyed it, but the feedback had been different than usual. Less like punishing the guilty and more like competing with another form of damnation. This world's rules were similar to his own dimension, but the details twisted in unfamiliar directions. Before the rider could analyze further, his senses screamed warning. Something massive was approaching. Not physically massive. The presence itself was enormous. A supernatural weight that pressed against reality like a titan pushing through tissue paper. The rider turned toward the source, hellfire intensifying around his skull. From the darkness at the alley's mouth, a figure emerged. Tall, red coat flowing despite no wind, hat brim shadowing a face split by a smile too wide, too knowing. Orange-tinted glasses that somehow made the darkness behind them seem deeper. White gloves that had never known honest work. And eyes. Red eyes that had watched civilizations fall. And laughed. My, the figure said, voice rich with amusement and something older than nations. "What have we here? You're not a vampire, not a demon, not quite human either." The smile widened impossibly. How delightful. The rider's chain ignited fully, hellfire roaring along its length. "I am vengeance," Zarathos declared. "I am the spirit that burns the guilty. Your sins are legend. Face judgment." The figure in red laughed. Truly laughed, a sound like avalanches of broken glass. "Judgment? Oh, you delicious little anomaly. I am the judgment this world deserves." The figure's form seemed to flicker, existing in multiple positions simultaneously. I am Alucard, and you, Burning One, have just made my century infinitely more interesting. The rider's hellfire blazed brighter as Alucard's shadows deepened. Two impossible forces, each unkillable in their own dimension, stood in a London alley while the night held its breath. Somewhere in Hellsing Manor, alarms were already screaming. If you want to see more crossover battles and unexpected universe collisions, hit that subscribe button and then drop the name of a character and universe you'd want to see in the comments below. Let's explore the infinite together. Hellsing Manor's situation room erupted in controlled chaos. Multiple screens displayed the East End, burning with flames that registered wrong on every sensor. Too hot, too blue, moving against wind patterns that didn't exist. Thermal imaging showed a heat signature that shouldn't be possible outside a forge, centered on a humanoid figure that every camera refused to focus on properly. Sir Integra Fairbrook Wingate's Hellsing stood before the displays, cigar smoke curling around her face as she processed the impossible data. Behind her glasses, ice blue eyes tracked every detail with the analytical precision that had kept Britain's supernatural defenses operational for generations. "Report," she commanded, voice cutting through the technician's urgent chatter. "Dimensional anomaly detected at 2347, ma'am," the lead analyst reported, on fingers flying across keyboards. "Massive energy spike in the East End, non-vampiric signature. Initial drone surveillance showed 17 ghouls incinerated in under 30 seconds by an unknown hostile." Unknown hostile? Integra's tone could have frozen blood. "Elaborate." The analyst's hands trembled slightly as he pulled up grainy footage. "Ma'am, the hostile appears to be a skeleton, wreathed in fire, riding a motorcycle. He dispatched a Millennium freak operative with some kind of ocular attack that caused spontaneous combustion from within." Integra leaned forward, studying the blurred image of the rider. The flames made clean imagery impossible, but the silhouette was clear enough. Skeletal, armed with a chain, moving with purpose through her city, burning everything it touched. Occult origin? Unknown, ma'am. The flames don't match any known supernatural signature in our database. It's not hellfire as we understand it, not demonic summoning, not cursed artifact manifestation. Whatever this is, it's from outside our operational knowledge. "Wonderful," Integra muttered, drawing on her cigar. "A new player on the board, and we have no idea whose side it's on or what it wants." She turned to the communications officer. "Where's Alucard?" "Already deployed, ma'am. He intercepted the hostile in the East End 4 minutes ago. No contact since." Of course he had. Alucard's supernatural senses would have detected the anomaly instantly, and his curiosity would override any sensible caution. Integra felt the familiar tension between relief and concern. Relief that her ultimate weapon was engaging the threat. A caustic concern that Alucard's idea of engagement usually left city blocks in ruins. "Get me a perimeter. I want the area evacuated and sealed. If this turns into a full supernatural incident, I don't want civilian casualties complicating matters." She crushed out her cigar with controlled violence. "And contact Section 13. If this is a Vatican operation, I want to know immediately." In the alley, the rider and Alucard circled each other like celestial bodies locked in mutual orbit. The vampire's presence weighed on reality itself. The rider's supernatural senses, designed to detect evil and judge the guilty, screamed contradictory information. Alucard registered as anciently evil. Centuries of slaughter, oceans of blood, cities reduced to charnel houses. But beneath that corruption lay something the rider had never encountered. Willing, joyful damnation. This creature had chosen its path, embraced its monstrous nature, and reveled in every atrocity. "You're staring," Alucard observed, tilting his head with theatrical curiosity. Or would that be glaring? Difficult to tell with the empty sockets. Very dramatic, by the way. I appreciate commitment to aesthetic. The rider's chain whipped forward without warning, hellfire trailing like a comet's tail. The attack moved faster than human eyes could track, designed to bind and burn in one motion. Alucard didn't dodge. He caught the chain. His white-gloved hand closed around the hellfire wreathed links, and his smile widened as supernatural flame washed over him. Smoke rose from his palm, the hellfire actually burning him. But the vampire's regeneration activated instantly. Flesh bubbled and reformed in real time, a burning and healing in continuous cycle. "Oh my," Alucard purred, examining his smoking hand with delight. "That actually hurts. Do you have any idea how rare that is? How wonderful?" His eyes flashed crimson behind the orange lenses. "Again. Do it again." The rider yanked the chain back, the links tearing free from Alucard's grip and taking chunks of the vampire's hand with them. The severed flesh hit the ground, still burning, refusing to extinguish even as it separated from its host. Alucard laughed, holding up his mangled hand as it regenerated completely in 3 seconds. "Fascinating. Your fire burns the undead specifically. Not just heat, actual supernatural combustion targeting animated corpses." He flexed his reformed fingers experimentally. "But I'm not just any corpse, am I? No. I'm so much more." The vampire's form flickered. Suddenly there were 3 Alucards, then 5, each one casting shadows that moved independently. The rider's senses couldn't determine which was real. They all registered as equally substantial, equally evil. "I've existed for over 500 years. Alucard's voice came from every direction simultaneously. "I've drunk the blood of thousands. I've ended bloodlines, toppled kingdoms, and turned devotion into despair." The duplicates circled the rider like sharks. "What makes you think your judgment means anything to me?" "Look into my eyes," the rider commanded, turning to face one of the Alucards. The Penance Stare activated at point-blank range. Alucard's crimson eyes locked with the rider's burning sockets, and the full weight of the vampire's sins came flooding back. Every life taken, and every scream silenced. Every soul consumed. Centuries of atrocity played out in an instant, forcing the guilty to experience all the pain they'd caused. For exactly 2 seconds, Alucard's smile faltered. Then it returned, wider than before. "Oh, that's delicious," the vampire breathed, his voice thick with ecstasy. "All those deaths, all that suffering, and I get to experience them again. You've given me a gift, burning one." The rider recoiled. The first time Zarathos had stepped back from an opponent in decades. The Penance Stare had worked. The vampire had experienced every sin. But instead of breaking under the weight of his evil, Alucard had enjoyed it. "You're not human," the rider growled, reprocessing his tactical assessment. "Haven't been for a very long time." Alucard's duplicates merged back into one, but the true vampire standing with arms spread wide. "I am the ultimate vampire. The monster that monsters fear, the punishment inflicted upon the wicked and the innocent alike. Your little eye trick? I've earned every second of suffering it showed me. And I'd do it all again." The rider's hellfire intensified, blue-white flames roaring higher. This creature defied everything the spirit of vengeance understood about punishment and redemption. The guilty were supposed to break. They were supposed to repent. Alucard leaned forward conspiratorially. "You're confused. I can see it even without proper eyes to read. You've never met someone who chose damnation, have you? Someone who looked at the abyss and said, 'Yes, this is exactly what I want.'" His grin turned predatory. "Welcome to the Hellsing universe, spirit of vengeance. Here, we weaponize our monsters." The rider's chain lashed out again, this time in a wide arc designed to decapitate. Alucard dissolved into shadows, reforming 15 feet away on the alley wall, standing perpendicular to gravity. "Now then," the vampire said, drawing the massive Casul pistol from his coat. "My master will want to meet you. You're coming with me? Willingly or in pieces that I'll reassemble later, your choice." The rider revved his motorcycle, hellfire erupting from the exhaust. "I serve no master. The guilty will burn." "Guilty?" Alucard's laughter echoed off brick walls. "Oh, burning one. In this world, we're all guilty. The question is whether you're useful." Before either could strike, a new presence entered the alley. The air itself seemed to sharpen, reality taking on a razored quality. The rider's senses detected holy energy. Weaponized holy energy, concentrated into something that could actually threaten supernatural entities. From the alley's opposite end, a figure emerged wearing priest's robes and a manic smile that rivaled Alucard's. Alexander Anderson, Vatican's chief enforcer, stood holding blessed bayonets that hummed with divine power. "A demon and a devil, standing in the Lord's city," Anderson announced, his Scottish accent thick with righteous fury. "How generous of ye both to save me the trouble of hunting." The rider turned to face this new threat, hellfire and holy power illuminating the alley from opposite ends. Alucard's smile became absolutely beatific. "Oh, Anderson, your timing is impeccable. We were just getting started." Alexander Anderson's regenerator enhancement allowed him to perceive the world in crystalline clarity. Every shadow, every movement, every spiritual pressure. What he saw before him made his zealot's heart sing with violent purpose. Two abominations. One a vampire so ancient and corrupted it wore sin like a second skin. The other a burning blasphemy that reeked of hellfire and damnation given flesh, or rather, bone. The priest's smile widened as he slid blessed bayonets between his fingers, 8 blades catching the light of both hellfire and street lamps. "Father Anderson," Alucard greeted with theatrical cheer. "How lovely of Section 13 to join our little party. Though I must say, your entrance lacks the usual scripture quotation. Losing your touch?" "And Iscariot sent their mad dog to clean up the mess," the vampire continued, ignoring the insult. "Tell me, Paladin, which one of us are you going to try killing first?" Anderson's eyes, sharp as his blessed blades, studied the rider with professional interest. The flaming skull, the chains wreathed in supernatural fire, the motorcycle that idled with an engine sound like distant screaming. Every instinct trained by decades of monster hunting told him this was demonic. But something felt wrong with that assessment. "What manner of devil are ye?" Anderson demanded, his voice carrying the absolute certainty of the faithful. "What foul summoning dragged ye into the Lord's earth?" The rider's skull turned toward the priest, hellfire intensifying. Zarathos recognized holy power when he sensed it. This human wielded divine authority weaponized into those bayonets. But the rider also sensed the blood on Anderson's hands. Hundreds dead. Most of them vampires and ghouls, legitimate targets of vengeance. But not all. Some had been human, killed for heresy, for sheltering monsters, for simply standing in the Vatican's way. "I am judgment," the rider declared, his voice layered with Zarathos's ancient authority. "I punish the guilty. Your hands are stained with innocent blood, priest." Anderson's smile didn't waver. "Innocent? There are no innocents in war against darkness, demon. Only soldiers of Christ and the damned." He raised his bayonets, the blessed steel beginning to glow. "And ye, you're clearly damned." "Oh, this is going to be magnificent," Alucard breathed, taking a step back to lean against the alley wall, utterly relaxed despite being in striking range of both combatants. The spirit of vengeance versus the Vatican's holy executioner. I should have brought popcorn. Anderson moved first. Regenerator enhancement granted superhuman speed. The priest crossed 30 feet in a blink. Blessed bayonets thrust toward the rider's skull in a pattern designed to pin and destroy. Each blade hummed with holy power, the kind that could reduce lesser demons to ash. The rider's chain intercepted 3 bayonets with contemptuous ease. Hellfire wreathed links, deflecting blessed steel in a shower of sparks that were both holy white and damnation blue. But Anderson's attack was a feint. His real strike came from his offhand, a bayonet aimed directly for the rider's spine. The blade struck bone. Holy energy and hellfire met in violent reaction, power discharging in a shockwave that blew out every window in a 50-foot radius. Anderson was thrown back. His regeneration, already healing, burns from hellfire splashback. The rider staggered, actually feeling the strike. The holy power in those bayonets could genuinely harm him, at least enough to register pain. "Ye bleed," Anderson roared triumphantly, seeing scorch marks on the rider's skeletal form where holy energy had scorched supernatural bone. "All demons bleed when cut by the Lord's wrath." The rider straightened, hellfire roaring back to full intensity. The damage Anderson had inflicted was already regenerating, bone restructuring itself through supernatural healing that rivaled any vampire. But the fact that the priest could harm him at all marked Anderson as a genuine threat. "You serve a righteous cause with unrighteous methods," the rider growled, his chain whipping in wide arcs that forced Anderson to retreat. "And your faith is corrupted by bloodlust. You enjoy the killing, priest. You revel in it." "Of course I do." Anderson laughed, the sound edged with mania. "Every monster I send back to hell is a glory unto God. Every vampire ash, every demon banished, every heretic silenced, all hymns sung in the Lord's name." He threw a bayonet with inhuman force. The rider caught it mid-flight, hellfire consuming the holy energy wrapped around the blade. The blessed steel melted in his skeletal grip, molten metal dripping between bone fingers to hiss against pavement. "Impressive," Anderson acknowledged, pulling more bayonets from within his priest robes, an impossible number drawn from nowhere. "But you'll find the Vatican's armory runs deeper than you think, devil." "This is better than theater," Alucard commented from his spectator position, lighting a cigarette he'd produced from somewhere. "The burning judge who punishes the wicked versus the holy killer who murders in God's name. The irony is chef's kiss." "Silence, vampire!" Both Anderson and the rider shouted simultaneously. They paused, exchanging glances, or in the rider's case, the eyeless equivalent. For a moment, an understanding passed between them. Both were warriors dedicated to destroying evil. Both operated outside conventional morality, and both found Alucard's commentary supremely annoying. Then they resumed trying to kill each other. Anderson charged again, this time with a dozen bayonets held between his fingers like claws. He moved in a whirlwind of blessed steel, each strike precise and lethal. The rider met him head-on. Chain and hellfire against holy blades, bone against regenerating flesh. They fought with the intensity of natural opposites. Divine punishment versus infernal judgment. The rider's chain wrapped around Anderson's arm. Hellfire seared flesh, burning through the priest's coat and scorching muscle beneath. Anderson's regeneration kicked in, but the supernatural fire kept burning, forcing him to slice off his own arm with a bayonet to prevent the flames from spreading. The severed limb hit the ground, still burning. A new arm grew from Anderson's shoulder in seconds, bones extending, muscles forming, skin sealing over fresh tissue. "Amen!" Anderson roared, his voice thick with religious ecstasy. "The Lord grants me endless resurrection to carry out his work. Ye cannae kill what God himself sustains." "I've burned angels who claim divine right," the rider countered. his hellfire intensifying until the entire alley glowed blue-white. Your regeneration means nothing to vengeance eternal. The chain lashed out in a pattern too fast to follow, each strike backed by centuries of Zarathos's combat experience. Anderson danced between the attacks, blessed bayonets deflecting hellfire-wreathed links, his regenerator speed pushing human limitations. Where chain and blade met, reality itself seemed to flinch. Alucard watched with genuine fascination. Both combatants were operating at levels that would destroy ordinary humans in seconds. The rider's hellfire was actually forcing Anderson to regenerate continuously, the holy man burning and healing in rapid cycle. Meanwhile, Anderson's blessed weapons were scoring genuine hits, each strike making the rider's bones crack with divine energy, or they're matched. Alucard observed to himself, impressed despite his usual arrogance. The priest's holy arsenal can hurt the burning one, and the fire burns faster than Anderson can heal. This could go on all night. A new sound cut through the combat, the rotors of military helicopters approaching from the north. The rider's supernatural senses detected them instantly. Human soldiers, heavily armed, following standard evacuation protocols around supernatural incidents. Hellsing reinforcements. And further back, tracking the helicopters, something else moved through London's shadows. More vampires. Dozens of them, attracted by the chaos like sharks to blood. Anderson sensed them too, his combat instincts honed by years of vampire hunting. The freak scum gather like flies to a corpse, he snarled, not taking his eyes off the rider. But you're the immediate threat, demon. London can't have two monsters burning through her streets. The innocent are fleeing, the rider stated, his awareness expanding beyond the alley. Ghouls pursue them. Freak vampires hunt in the shadows. You waste time fighting vengeance incarnate, while true evil slaughters the helpless. Ye are true evil, Anderson shot back. Hellfire and damnation wearing bone like a mask. The rider's skull tilted, empty sockets boring into Anderson's zealot eyes. Then use your penance stare, priest. Look into my eyes. See what I've done. See who I've judged. See if I deserve your holy blades. Anderson hesitated. Something in that challenge struck differently than typical demonic taunting. The burning skull radiated certainty, a confidence that spoke of genuine belief in its own righteousness. Do it, Father, Alucard encouraged, his voice suddenly serious. I'm curious myself. I've already experienced his little eye trick. Let's see if it works the same on you. Anderson's grip tightened on his bayonets. Then, with the reckless courage of the truly faithful, he locked eyes with the rider. The Penance Stare activated. But instead of experiencing the rider's sins, Anderson saw the rider's judgments. Every soul burned by hellfire, every criminal reduced to ash, every predator punished. An endless cavalcade of vengeance delivered to the guilty, and underneath it all, the agony of Johnny Blaze, the human soul trapped within Zarathos, forced to witness every burning. Anderson staggered back, blessed bayonets clattering from his grip. Mother of God. What did you see? Alucard demanded, genuinely curious now, and the priest looked at the rider with new understanding and new horror. Not a demon, an angel. A broken, burning, damned angel. The Hellsing helicopters circled at a cautious distance, searchlights cutting through the smoke and hellfire haze. Inside the lead transport, Sir Integra Hellsing listened to her field commander's increasingly frantic reports while maintaining the iron composure that had defined her family for generations. Ma'am, the hostile has engaged both Alucard and a Section 13 operative, confirmed as Paladin Alexander Anderson. Current status, three-way standoff. Structural damage to 4 buildings. 17 civilian evacuations complete. No human casualties yet, but what? Integra's voice could cut glass. Ma'am, the thermal readings are spiking. Whatever that fire is, it's not cooling down. It's getting hotter. If this escalates further, we're looking at a city block reduced to ash. Integra drew a fresh cigar, not lighting it yet. A habit when calculating impossible odds. Alucard engaging an unknown supernatural entity was expected. Anderson's presence meant the Vatican had detected the anomaly and sent their rabid dog to handle it. But a 3-way battle in central London between forces that could level buildings. Unacceptable. "Prep the containment team," she ordered, "and get me a direct line to Anderson. If Section 13 wants to operate in my city, they'll do it under my protocols." In the alley, Anderson knelt with both hands pressed against his temples, the after-images of the Penance Stare still burning behind his eyes. He'd seen judgment delivered to the guilty, thousands of them. Murderers, rapists, slavers, demon worshippers, all reduced to ash by hellfire. But he'd also seen the cost. Johnny Blaze screaming silently within the rider's skull, a human soul trapped inside vengeance incarnate, forced to watch every burning while unable to stop it. "Not what you expected, Judas Priest?" Alucard asked, retrieving his fallen hat and dusting it off with exaggerated care. Anderson rose slowly, reclaiming his bayonets with hands that trembled slightly. Not from fear, but from theological crisis. His entire worldview divided existence into simple categories: servants of God and servants of hell. The rider defied that binary. Hellfire and vengeance, damnation and justice, all wrapped in burning bone. "He punishes the guilty," Anderson said quietly, more to himself than Alucard. "Every soul he's burned deserved judgment. But the method..." He looked at the rider with something between respect and horror. Damnation as divine tool, a devil serving righteousness. "I am not your enemy, priest," the rider stated, his hellfire dimming slightly, not from weakness, but from conscious control. "Your blades are blessed. Your mission is holy. But your methods are stained with innocent blood. You walk the line between judgment and murder." "Pot, meet kettle," Alucard murmured, earning glares from both combatants. Before the confrontation could reignite, the rider's skull snapped toward the east. His supernatural senses, tuned to detect evil and suffering, screamed warning. Multiple signatures, not the scattered freak vampires he'd sensed earlier. This was organized, coordinated. "Something comes," the rider announced. "Evil, organized, many." Anderson felt it too, his regenerator-enhanced instincts prickling. More freaks. The bastards never attack alone when they can swarm. Alucard's smile returned, sharp and anticipatory. "Oh, they're not just attacking randomly. Someone's directing them. Millennium must have noticed our little light show and decided to test the new player." From the shadows at every compass point, they emerged. Freak vampires, artificial creations of Millennium's occult science. Humans implanted with vampire chips and transformed into loyal super soldiers. Unlike traditional vampires who required centuries to develop power, freaks were mass-produced, weaker individually than true vampires, but numerous and utterly expendable. 30 of them materialized in the alley and surrounding rooftops. Former soldiers wearing tattered Nazi uniforms, their eyes glowing with vampiric hunger and technological madness. Each one bore the insignia of Millennium, a swastika twisted with occult symbols that made even the rider's hellfire flicker in recognition of their wrongness. "Guten Abend, gentlemen," the lead freak announced in accented English. a former SS officer whose transformation had left his face partially mechanical. The Major sends his regards and a simple request. Surrender the burning anomaly for study, or be destroyed. Anderson's response was to hurl 3 blessed bayonets in rapid succession, each blade finding a freak's heart with supernatural precision. The artificial vampires shrieked as holy energy burned through their stolen immortality, reducing them to ash before they hit the ground. The Vatican never surrenders to Nazi scum, Anderson snarled. Alucard drew both the Casal and Jackal, his twin hand cannons designed to destroy supernatural threats with overwhelming force. And I haven't had a proper warm-up in weeks. You Millennium pests picked the perfect night to die. The rider's chain ignited with renewed fury, hellfire roaring along its length as Zarathos processed the situation. These creatures, freaks, registered differently than the true vampire Alucard. They were unwilling victims, humans transformed against their core nature through technology and dark science. Some had volunteered, yes, but the transformation had stripped away their humanity and enslaved them to Millennium's will. Victims and perpetrators, all wrapped in one corrupted package. Your souls cry for release, the rider declared, his voice echoing with supernatural authority. Millennium's evil binds you. I will free you through flame. The freaks attacked as one, moving with inhuman speed and coordination that spoke of technological enhancement beyond mere vampirism. They swarmed from all directions, claws extended, fangs bared, operating with the tactical precision of their former military training. What they encountered was 3 different varieties of unstoppable. Anderson moved like a whirlwind of blessed steel, his regenerator speed pushing beyond human limits. Bayonets found hearts, severed heads, carved through vampiric flesh that tried desperately to regenerate. Each blade hummed with holy power, and each strike reduced a freak to ash. The priest fought with the precision of a surgeon and the enthusiasm of a zealot, his laughter ringing through the alley as he carved through Millennium's forces. Amen, Amen, our hallelujah, Anderson roared, his voice rising in religious ecstasy with each kill. Back to hell, Nazi scum. The Lord's work is never done. Alucard fought with the casual arrogance of an apex predator playing with food. The Kazul and Jackal roared, each shot fired with impossible precision. The special ammunition, blessed silver and explosive tips designed specifically to destroy vampires, tore through freak bodies like tissue paper. But Alucard didn't just shoot. He toyed with them. His shadows came alive, tendrils of darkness that grabbed freaks mid-leap and crushed them. His form flickered between positions, moving faster than even vampiric eyes could track. When one freak managed to claw his face, Alucard's wound regenerated instantly while his grin widened. Is that all? The vampire asked mockingly. Millennium's vaunted freak soldiers? I fought better opponents in my sleep. But the rider's approach was different. His chain swept in wide arcs, each strike wreathed in hellfire that didn't just destroy, it judged. When the lynx made contact with freak vampires, the supernatural flame ignited something deeper than flesh. It burned the technological corruption binding them, the vampire chips that enslaved their souls, the dark science that had transformed them into monsters. The freaks didn't just die, they were freed. Your pain ends, the rider's voice accompanied each strike. Your slavery ends. Your suffering ends. Burn and be free. The hellfire consumed them completely, reducing corrupted flesh and technological abomination to ash. But the screams that emerged weren't agony. They were relief. and the unwilling victims within the freak vampires, the humans who'd been transformed and enslaved, experienced one moment of clarity before oblivion. The rider's hellfire didn't just destroy, it liberated. Anderson noticed it mid-strike, pausing with a bayonet raised. They're thanking him? How disgustingly heroic, Alucard observed, shooting 3 more freaks without looking. He's not just killing them, he's saving them. From a certain point of view. The battle lasted 4 minutes. 30 freak vampires reduced to ash by 3 different methodologies. Anderson's holy execution, Alucard's contemptuous superiority, and the rider's liberating vengeance. When the last artificial vampire fell, the alley was silent except for the crackling of hellfire and the settling of ash. The rider stood in the center of the carnage, his chain slowly coiling back around his skeletal arm. His supernatural senses detected no more immediate threats, but something else had caught his attention during the fight. They were sent, the rider stated. Not hunting, sent. Someone commands them, someone guilty of their creation. Millennium, Anderson confirmed, wiping vampire ash from his priest robes. Nazi bastards who never accepted defeat. They've been building an army of artificial vampires for decades. The Major, their leader, is preparing for something massive. Alucard holstered his weapons, his earlier playfulness replaced by genuine interest. And they just tested our burning friend here, sent expendable freaks to gauge his capabilities. The vampire's smile turned calculating, which means they're watching, right now. As if on cue, every screen in the surrounding buildings, abandoned shops, apartment windows, even a digital billboard 3 blocks away, flickered to life simultaneously. The same image appeared on all of them. A round-faced man in military uniform, his expression one of delighted mania. The Major. "Guten Abend, gentlemen." The Nazi commander's voice boomed from dozens of speakers. What a spectacular demonstration. 37 freaks destroyed in 4 minutes by 3 separate combatants. Magnificent efficiency. The rider's hellfire intensified, his skull turning to face the nearest screen. "Show yourself, coward. Face judgment." The Major's smile widened. "Oh, I think not, Herr. What shall we call you? The Burning Man? The Skull Rider?" Regardless, you are fascinating. A supernatural entity from outside our reality, capable of destroying our freaks with contemptuous ease. I simply must have you. You'll have nothing but ashes, Anderson growled. And this is why I adore war, the Major continued, ignoring the threat. It brings together the most interesting individuals. A burning judge from another dimension, the Vatican's holy executioner, and of course, the legendary Alucard himself, all in one place. It's like Christmas. Alucard lit another cigarette, completely relaxed despite the tension. Get to the point, Major. Your dramatic monologues bore me. The point, Vampire, is that our schedule has been adjusted. Your burning friend's arrival presents opportunities we cannot ignore. Consider this your formal invitation to our grand finale. The screens flickered, showing new images. London landmarks, Parliament, Buckingham Palace, the Tower. 3 days. That's when we bring war to your doorstep. And when we do, I'll see exactly what your flame can burn, Herr Rider. The screens went dark. Silence settled over the alley, broken only by the distant helicopter rotors and the crackling of hellfire. The Hellsing Manor Situation Room had transformed into a war council within the hour. Maps of London covered every available surface, marked with red zones indicating known Millennium activity, blue zones for civilian evacuation routes, and one new addition: a blazing orange marker for the East End alley where the dimensional anomaly had first appeared. Sir Integra stood at the head of the tactical table, cigar smoke wreathing her face as she processed the impossible situation. Her entire adult life had been spent managing supernatural threats to Britain, but those threats had always operated within known parameters. Vampires had weaknesses. Ghouls followed predictable patterns. Even Alucard, for all his chaos, served her family's bloodline. This burning skeleton answered to no one. Satellite imagery confirms the freak deployment was a probing attack, her intelligence officer reported, pulling up thermal scans. Millennium sacrificed 30 units to gather combat data on the anomaly. They now know his capabilities, attack patterns, and most importantly, that he can be damaged by blessed weapons. Anderson's bayonet scored hits, Integra mused, studying freeze frames of the three-way battle. The image quality was poor. Hellfire played havoc with cameras, but the tactical implications were clear. So the entity isn't invulnerable. It can be hurt, but not killed, ma'am, the officer added grimly. Watch the regeneration cycle. The footage showed Anderson's blessed bayonet striking the rider's skeletal spine, holy energy scorching supernatural bone. Then, within seconds, the damage reversed itself. Bone restructured, the hellfire intensified, and the rider continued fighting without slowing. Regeneration on par with Alucard's, Integra noted. Possibly faster for skeletal damage specifically. She drew on her cigar, mind racing through strategic calculations. And the fire itself? Unlike anything in our database, it burns vampires from the inside out, consumes ghouls instantly, and melts blessed silver. Dr. Talbot's initial analysis suggests it's not conventional fire at all. It's some form of metaphysical combustion that targets supernatural corruption specifically. Integra's eyes narrowed. A weapon that could burn away vampiric essence? That was either the most dangerous threat to Alucard she'd ever encountered, or the most valuable asset against Millennium. The question was, which side would the rider choose? A door slammed open with characteristic violence. Alucard strolled into the situation room as if he owned it, Anderson following behind with visible reluctance. The vampire had apparently convinced, or coerced, the Vatican's paladin into temporary cooperation. "Master," Alucard greeted with his usual mocking bow. "I've brought a guest. Try not to shoot him. Integra hates when I get blood on the carpets." "Anderson." Integra's tone was ice. "This is Hellsing territory. Section 13 has no jurisdiction here." The priest's jaw tightened, but he maintained control. Years of fighting alongside and against Hellsing had taught him when to set aside organizational rivalry. "The Burning Man is outside both our jurisdictions, Hellsing. This is bigger than Catholic versus Protestant squabbles." "Agreed," Integra conceded, surprising them both. She gestured to the tactical displays. The Major's broadcast was received by every intelligence agency in Europe. MI5 is demanding answers. The Prime Minister wants assurances. And I have a supernatural entity of unknown origin burning through East London with enough power to threaten Alucard himself. "He doesn't threaten me," Alucard corrected lazily. "He interests me. There's a difference." "Where is he now?" Integra demanded. Anderson's expression darkened. "Gone. After the Major's transmission ended, he mounted that hell bike of his and rode off into the night. Said something about hunting the source of corruption before I could stop him." Integra's fingers tightened on her cigar. An unstoppable supernatural entity loose in her city, hunting targets by his own criteria of guilt and innocence. And the potential for collateral damage was astronomical. "Track him," she ordered her tech team. "Thermal signatures, supernatural resonance, anything that can—" "Ma'am," a technician interrupted, pulling up new footage. "He's active again. South London. Multiple heat signatures matching his profile." The screens showed the rider tearing through what appeared to be an abandoned warehouse district. Hellfire illuminated the night as his chain carved through dozens of ghouls. But these weren't random undead. They were organized, equipped with military weapons, guarding something. "Zoom in on the warehouse," Integra commanded. The enhanced image revealed Nazi insignia, spray-painted across the building's exterior. Inside, glimpsed through broken windows, were stacks of coffins. Hundreds of them. "Christ in heaven," Anderson breathed. "A staging ground. Millennium's been hiding freak reinforcements throughout the city." Alucard's smile turned sharp. "And our burning friend just found one. How delightful. He's hunting Nazis." The rider's chain smashed through the warehouse's reinforced door as if it were paper. Inside, the structure opened into a vast space filled with coffins arranged in military precision. Each one housed a freak vampire in hibernation, waiting for activation orders. The air reeked of corrupted blood and dark science. Zarathos's supernatural senses counted them. 347 coffins. 347 souls enslaved by Millennium's technology. 347 victims and perpetrators merged into weapons of war. "Guilty," the rider's voice echoed through the warehouse. "All are guilty. Millennium for the creation. The freaks for willing participation. Was this abomination ends now." Hellfire erupted from the rider's skeletal form, spreading across the warehouse floor like living liquid. Where the supernatural flame touched coffins, wood ignited and burned with blue-white intensity. The freaks inside didn't even wake. The hellfire consumed them in their sleep, burning away the vampire chips, the corrupted flesh, the enslaved souls. Some screamed. Most simply, ended. But as the rider worked his way through the warehouse, burning Millennium's hidden army, his supernatural senses detected something else. Deeper, underground, a basement level that shouldn't exist. The rider's fist smashed through the warehouse floor, hellfire-wreathed bone punching through concrete as if it were cardboard. Below, a hidden laboratory came into view. Stainless steel tables covered with surgical equipment. UR computer systems monitoring vital signs. And at the center, a dozen human prisoners strapped to gurneys. Living humans. Terrified. About to be transformed into freaks. The rider dropped through the hole, landing in the underground facility with enough force to crack the floor. The hellfire that constantly surrounded him dimmed slightly. An unconscious response to the presence of genuine innocence. These people weren't guilty. They were victims. "Please." One of them, a young woman with tear-streaked face, strained against her restraints. "Please help us. They're going to change us into those things." Before the rider could respond, the laboratory speakers crackled to life. "Ah, Herr Rider." The doctor's voice, Millennium's chief scientist, his tone carrying clinical detachment. "How predictable. The hero always saves the innocent, yes? But let me pose a philosophical question. What happens when saving them kills them?" The restraints on the gurneys hissed, mechanical systems engaging. The prisoners screamed as needles extended from the tables, poised to inject them with vampire chips. "You have 30 seconds," the doctor continued conversationally. 30 seconds before these subjects become freaks. You can burn this facility and everyone in it. Guaranteed death, guaranteed prevention of their transformation. Or you can try to save them, risk failing, and potentially add 12 more vampires to our army. What will the spirit of vengeance choose? The rider's hellfire blazed brighter as Zarathos processed the sadistic choice. Every instinct screamed to burn, to destroy Millennium's lab and prevent the transformation. But Johnny Blaze's consciousness, trapped within the rider, recoiled at the thought of killing innocents. 20 seconds, the doctor announced. The machines are quite efficient. Once injection begins, transformation is irreversible. You cannot burn the vampire chips out of living subjects. Your fire would kill them just as surely. The rider's chain lashed out, wrapping around the nearest gurney's restraints. Hellfire should have melted the metal instantly, but these restraints were reinforced with something. Blessed silver, ironically. Holy material used for unholy purposes, the same substance that had hurt him when wielded by Anderson. The restraints resisted the hellfire. Clever, yes? The doctor mocked. We learned from your battle. Blessed materials slow your combustion effect. You'll never free them all in time. 10 seconds. The rider made his choice. His hellfire surged outward in a controlled explosion, not burning the prisoners, but surrounding them. The supernatural flame formed barriers between each gurney and the injection systems, creating walls of judgment fire that the mechanical arms couldn't penetrate. When the needles tried to extend, they met hellfire and melted before reaching flesh. Fascinating. The doctor's voice actually sounded impressed. Controlled combustion as defensive measure. You're full of surprises, Herr Rider. But you cannot maintain those barriers forever. Eventually, you'll tire. And when you do, the rider's fist punched through the nearest computer terminal, hellfire spreading through the laboratory's electronic systems. Screens exploded, wiring melted, backup generators caught fire and burned with supernatural intensity. Within seconds, the entire underground facility was ablaze. But the hellfire carefully avoided the prisoners, creating protective pockets of space around each gurney. I will burn this facility to ashes, the rider declared, and carry every innocent to safety. Your experiments end here, Doctor. Your guilt will follow. He grabbed the first gurney, blessed silver restraints and all, lifting it with superhuman strength. The hellfire intensified around him, forming a path through the burning laboratory toward the hole in the ceiling. One by one, he would evacuate them all. The doctor's laughter echoed through failing speakers. Such heroism, such determination. You are exactly what the Major predicted. A warrior bound by mercy, which makes you predictable. The far wall of the laboratory exploded inward. More through the breach came something that made even the rider pause. A massive figure, 8 feet tall, wrapped in shadows that seemed to devour light itself. Millennium's captain, a werewolf of such ancient power that reality itself seemed reluctant to fully acknowledge his presence. The captain didn't speak. He simply existed, a supernatural force of nature pointed at the rider like a loaded weapon. The captain has no moral conflict, the doctor explained, his voice tinged with scientific enthusiasm. No hesitation, no mercy. He exists solely to follow orders, and his orders are simple. Keep you occupied while this facility completes its purpose. The rider set down the gurney he'd been carrying, positioning himself between the captain and the prisoners. Hellfire roared to full intensity, skeletal hands clenching into fists. Then he will burn like all the guilty, the rider growled. The captain's form shifted, muscles rippling beneath tattered uniform as lycanthropic transformation began. His response was a howl that shattered every remaining glass surface in the laboratory. The spirit of vengeance and Millennium's ultimate soldier faced each other in a burning underground facility, with 12 innocent lives hanging in the balance. The captain's transformation was unlike any lycanthropic shift the rider had encountered in his dimension. This wasn't a werewolf struggling against human nature. This was an ancient predator who'd long ago surrendered his humanity entirely. Bones lengthened, muscles expanded, and silver-gray fur erupted across flesh that seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time. The creature that emerged stood nearly 9 feet tall, its eyes reflecting nothing but primal hunger and absolute obedience to Millennium's will. The rider's supernatural senses analyzed the threat. Ancient evil, centuries old, willingly damned. The captain had chosen his monstrous nature and embraced it without reservation or regret. Unlike the freak vampires who were victims of technology, this creature was a volunteer in damnation. Guilty, the rider declared, no hellfire intensifying until the entire laboratory glowed blue-white. The captain moved. Lycanthropic speed pushed beyond normal limits. One moment the werewolf stood across the laboratory, the next his claws were inches from the rider's skull. The rider's chain intercepted the strike. Hellfire wreathed links catching claws that could shred steel. The impact generated a shockwave that buckled the laboratory floor. Behind them, the prisoners screamed as their gurneys shook from the collision. The captain didn't howl or roar. He fought in absolute silence, his attacks coordinated with military precision despite his monstrous form. Claws sought weak points, joints between bones, gaps in the rider's skeletal structure. When the hellfire burned his fur, the werewolf simply regenerated, the flesh bubbling and reforming faster than the supernatural flame could consume it. The rider drove his fist into the captain's chest, hellfire exploding on impact. The werewolf was thrown backward, crashing through stainless steel tables and computer equipment. Smoke rose from the crater burned into his torso, organs visible and charred. The wound closed in 3 seconds. "You heal like the vampire," the rider observed, his chain coiling for another strike. "But you are worse. The vampire revels in damnation. You simply accept it. No joy, no regret. Just obedience to evil masters." The captain's response was to phase partially out of reality, his form becoming translucent and shadow-wrapped. The rider's next chain strike passed through him as if he were mist, hellfire unable to burn what wasn't fully present. And then the werewolf solidified behind the rider, claws raking across skeletal spine with enough force to carve through supernatural bone. The rider staggered, actually feeling pain as the captain's claws proved capable of harming him. Not blessed like Anderson's bayonets, but ancient and powerful enough to affect supernatural entities directly. The rider spun, his elbow catching the captain's jaw with bone-shattering force. The werewolf's head snapped back, fangs flying loose, but he didn't retreat. Instead, he grabbed the rider's skeletal arm with both clawed hands and pulled. Bone cracked. The rider's arm separated at the elbow, torn free by lycanthropic strength that matched his own. For the first time since arriving in the Hellsing universe, the rider experienced genuine injury. His severed arm lay on the laboratory floor. He still wreathed in hellfire, fingers twitching with residual supernatural energy. "Enough!" the rider roared, and hellfire erupted from his body in all directions. The blast consumed the laboratory in a sphere of judgment flame, burning equipment, melting walls, igniting everything within 20 feet. The captain caught the full force, his entire body engulfed in blue-white fire that burned hot enough to melt steel. Fur ignited, flesh charred, bones began to show through. But the werewolf still didn't fall. He stood within the hellfire, regenerating continuously, his ancient power fighting against the rider's supernatural combustion in a contest of immortal endurance. The standoff lasted 15 seconds, an eternity in combat time. The captain burned and healed. The rider maintained the hellfire while his severed arm regenerated, a new bone growing from his shoulder, skeletal fingers reforming. Then the prisoner's screaming reminded both combatants that they weren't alone. The hellfire barriers the rider had created around the gurneys were holding, but barely. The defensive flames flickered as the rider's concentration split between fighting the captain and protecting innocents. The doctor's voice crackled through speakers that were somehow still functional despite the inferno. 30% power remaining in the injection systems, the scientist reported clinically. The backup generators are quite resilient. In approximately 2 minutes, enough power will be restored to complete the transformations. Unless, of course, you stop fighting and evacuate the subjects. But then the captain would be free to hunt them down individually. A tactical trap. If the rider focused on fighting the captain, the prisoners would be transformed. If he focused on evacuating them, the captain would attack while his defenses were lowered. And maintaining hellfire barriers while regenerating and fighting was draining even Zarathos's considerable power reserves. The rider's newly reformed fist clenched. He needed to change the equation. You serve monsters who create monsters. The rider addressed the captain directly, even knowing the werewolf likely couldn't understand or care. You are a weapon, but even weapons can be broken. The chain lashed out, not at the captain, but at the laboratory's support pillars. Hellfire wreath links smashed through reinforced concrete, weakening the structural integrity. The ceiling groaned, stress fractures spreading like spider webs. The captain understood the tactic instantly. Bury the entire facility, killing rider and prisoners together. The werewolf lunged, trying to stop the rider from demolishing more pillars. But that was exactly what the rider wanted. As the captain closed distance, the rider's chain reversed direction mid-strike, wrapping around the werewolf's neck with precision born from centuries of combat experience. The hellfire wreath links tightened like a noose, burning fur and flesh, cutting towards spine and windpipe. The captain's claws tore at the chain, lycanthropic strength fighting supernatural restraint. His regeneration battled the hellfire, healing and burning in rapid cycle. But the rider didn't try to hold him in place. Instead, he lifted. With superhuman strength augmented by Zarathos's demonic power, the rider swung the captain in a wide arc, using the werewolf's own momentum and mass as a wrecking ball. The captain's body smashed through the laboratory's far wall, through the underground tunnel beyond, and into the warehouse's foundation supports. The entire structure groaned. "Fall!" the rider commanded. The warehouse above collapsed inward, hundreds of tons of concrete and steel dropping into the underground laboratory. The captain vanished under the avalanche, buried under debris that would take even his regeneration minutes to dig through. The rider immediately released his offensive hellfire, redirecting all power to the protective barriers around the prisoners. The falling debris hit those barriers and bounced, hellfire creating cushions that absorbed impact. Concrete and steel piled up around the gurneys, but the flames prevented anything from actually touching the prisoners. When the collapse settled, the rider stood in a pocket of clear space surrounded by rubble. 12 gurneys arranged in a circle around him, each one protected by walls of judgment fire. Dust filled the air, and somewhere beneath tons of debris, the captain was already clawing his way upward. Time to move. The rider grabbed 2 gurneys, one under each skeletal arm, blessed silver restraints and all. His hellfire surrounded them protectively as he jumped, superhuman leg strength launching him upward through the collapsed warehouse. He crashed through debris, through the remains of coffins and burning timber, emerging into the night air. Hellsing helicopters circled overhead, searchlights converging on him instantly. The rider ignored them setting down the 2 gurneys on safe ground 50 yards from the warehouse wreckage. The prisoners inside were terrified but unharmed, still strapped to their medical tables but no longer in immediate danger. "Do not move," the rider commanded them. "I return for the others." He dove back into the rubble. 10 more trips. Each time, the rider descended into the unstable wreckage, located a gurney through the dust and darkness, and carried it to safety. The hellfire barriers never faltered, even as his power reserves depleted. Johnny Blaze's voice, usually silent within Zarathos's consciousness, pushed forward with desperate determination. "Save them all. We save them all." On the 8th trip, the captain broke free. The werewolf erupted from the rubble like a missile, debris exploding in all directions. His body was a mass of barely healed wounds, bones still resetting, fur scorched away to reveal burned flesh beneath. But his eyes held the same emotionless determination. The rider, carrying gurney number 9, met the captain's charge with a kick that sent the werewolf tumbling backward into the wreckage. No words, no hesitation, just mechanical efficiency. Protect the innocent, repel the threat, continue the mission. The captain came again. The rider's chain intercepted him mid-leap, wrapping around lupine legs and pulling, slamming the werewolf face first into concrete. The rider didn't stop moving, didn't pause to finish the fight. He carried the gurney to safety, set it down with the others, and immediately returned for numbers 10 and 11. By the time the rider retrieved the final prisoner, the captain had regenerated enough to stand. The 2 supernatural entities faced each other across the burning warehouse ruins. One, a spirit of vengeance, who'd successfully evacuated 12 innocents despite overwhelming opposition. The other, a weapon who'd failed his mission through no fault of his own. For a moment, they simply stared at each other. The rider's hellfire burned lower now, power reserves depleted from the extended rescue operation. The captain's form wavered, regeneration still incomplete. Then, from the surrounding streets, Hellsing forces arrived in full deployment. Armored vehicles, tactical teams, and at their head, Alucard strolling with his hands in his pockets, like he was out for an evening walk. The vampire surveyed the scene. Burning warehouse, crater where a laboratory had been, 12 rescued prisoners, and the rider standing protectively between them and the captain. "Well," Alucard said cheerfully, "this is interesting. Father Anderson, your professional opinion?" The Vatican paladin emerged from the opposite direction, blessed bayonets ready. He'd been tracking the rider independently, following the trail of hellfire through South London. His eyes took in the rescued prisoners, the destroyed Millennium facility, the exhausted but defiant rider. "He saved them," Anderson said quietly, almost surprised. "Every last one, while fighting the captain himself." The priest's grip on his weapons loosened slightly. "That's not demonic behavior." The captain's head swiveled, calculating odds. Alucard alone would be an even match. Alucard plus Anderson plus a full Hellsing tactical deployment, all while the rider stood between him and his targets. The werewolf was a weapon, but he wasn't stupid. The captain's form blurred, becoming translucent again. He retreated into shadows, disappearing into the night to report his failure to Millennium. The rider watched him go, then turned to face the new arrivals. His hellfire reignited slightly, not aggressive, but ready. 12 rescued humans behind him, an army of supernatural hunters and holy warriors in front of him, and absolutely no intention of surrendering. "The innocents are safe," the rider announced. "They will not become monsters. I will allow no one to harm them." Alucard's smile widened. "Oh, we're not here to harm them, Burning One. We're here to recruit you." Sir Integra Hellsing emerged from her command vehicle with the bearing of someone accustomed to authority in impossible situations. She wore her tailored suit like armor, and her eyes, cold blue and calculating behind wire-rimmed glasses, assessed the rider with the same clinical precision she'd use evaluating a new weapon system. Behind her, tactical teams maintained perimeter security, while medics rushed to attend the rescued prisoners. The 12 humans, still strapped to their gurneys, were being carefully freed from their restraints and checked for signs of vampire chip implantation. Early reports confirmed what the rider already knew. None had been transformed. All 12 were human. All 12 were saved. "I am Sir Integra Fairbrook Wingates Hellsing," she announced, her voice carrying absolute authority. "Director of the Hellsing Organization and Her Majesty's primary defense against supernatural threats to the United Kingdom." She drew a fresh cigar, not lighting it yet. "And you are an unknown entity operating in my jurisdiction, destroying enemy assets while simultaneously causing massive property damage." The rider's skull tilted, empty eye sockets fixing on Integra with an intensity that made several nearby soldiers step back nervously. "I am vengeance. I serve no master. I hunt the guilty. Your jurisdiction means nothing to judgment." "Told you he'd say that," Alucard murmured from his position leaning against a tactical vehicle. Integra ignored her vampire servant, stepping closer to the rider despite the hellfire still flickering around his skeletal form. To her credit, and she showed no fear, only the controlled wariness of someone who'd spent her life commanding monsters. "Let me be clear," Integra said, each word precise. "You destroyed a Millennium staging facility containing over 300 freak vampires. You rescued 12 civilians marked for transformation. You fought Millennium's captain to a standstill while maintaining defensive protocols for non-combatants." She paused, studying the rider's reaction. "Those are the actions of an ally, not an enemy. But allies in this war require coordination, structure, command. I require none of these," the rider countered. "I will burn Millennium to ash. I will punish the guilty. I do not need your permission." Anderson stepped forward, his earlier hostility tempered by grudging respect. "You're powerful, demon. I'll grant you that. Powerful enough to slaughter freaks by the dozen. But Millennium isn't just freaks and ghouls. They have the captain, who ye just fought. They have the doctor's abominations. They have Rip Van Winkle's magic bullets, Zoran's mind rape abilities, and the warrant officer's illusions." The priest's expression hardened. "And they have the Major, who's been planning this war for over 50 years. Ye cannae fight them all alone." "I have fought armies," the rider stated, hellfire pulsing with his words. "I have burned warlords and their followers. I have reduced empires of evil to nothing but ash and screaming. Millennium will be no different." "Millennium isn't just an empire of evil," Integra corrected coldly. "They're a death cult that worships war itself. The Major doesn't want to rule. He doesn't want resources or territory. He wants to create the most spectacular conflict possible and die in its flames." She finally lit her cigar, smoke curling upward. "They're not trying to win. They're trying to burn everything down, including you, if you're foolish enough to fight them without intelligence or support." The rider's hellfire dimmed slightly, not from intimidation, but from Johnny Blaze's consciousness pushing forward. The human soul within Zarathos processed Integra's words with the analytical mind of a former stunt rider who'd learned to calculate risks. Millennium wasn't a traditional enemy. They were zealots pursuing apocalypse for its own sake. Fighting them required more than pure vengeance. It required strategy. "What do you propose?" the rider asked, his voice still layered with supernatural authority but carrying a hint of Johnny's pragmatism. Integra smiled, a cold, calculated expression that reminded everyone present why she commanded the Hellsing organization despite being fully human in a world of monsters. "Temporary alliance. You maintain operational independence. I'm not fool enough to think I can command you. But you coordinate with Hellsing intelligence. We tell you where Millennium facilities are. You burn them. We handle the aftermath and evacuate civilians before you arrive." "And what does the Vatican get in this arrangement?" Anderson demanded, his bayonet still held ready. "The same opportunity," Integra replied without looking at him. "Section 13 can coordinate through Hellsing channels. I don't care about Catholic Protestant politics when Nazi vampires are preparing to invade London, and this is about maximizing efficiency against a common enemy." Anderson's jaw tightened, but he nodded slowly. "The Vatican will consider it, but the demon stays under observation. If he burns innocent souls, I burn only the guilty," the rider interrupted, his hellfire flaring aggressively. "Your blessed blades harm me, priest. I have felt your holy power, but do not threaten me with judgment. You who kill in God's name while enjoying the slaughter. You whose hands are stained with blood of heretics who committed no crime but disagreement." Anderson's smile turned sharp and dangerous. "Careful, demon. We're not enemies yet, but we can be." "Enough!" Integra's command cut through the mounting tension. "Anderson, the burning entity hasn't harmed a single innocent since arriving in our dimension. He's destroyed ghouls, freaks, and Millennium assets exclusively. Whatever he is, he's targeting the right enemies." She turned back to the rider. "The question is whether you're willing to be effective or merely destructive." The rider stood silent for a long moment, the flames around his skull flickering with internal debate. Zarathos wanted to reject all authority, to hunt Millennium on his own terms without compromise. But Johnny Blaze's voice pushed harder now, pointing out the logic. Hellsing knew this world's supernatural landscape. They had intelligence networks, resources, tactical data. Fighting alone meant chasing rumors and burning random targets. Fighting smart meant coordinating attacks to maximize damage to Millennium while protecting innocents. "I will coordinate," the rider finally announced. "But I make no promises to follow your orders. If I sense evil that requires judgment, I will deliver it, regardless of your protocols." "Acceptable," Integra said immediately. "Alucard will serve as your liaison. He's the only one present who can survive if you decide to burn him." "How generous of you, Master," Alucard said dryly. "Assigning me to babysit the dimension-hopping skeleton. This is punishment for shooting that butler last month, isn't it?" "Consider it penance," Integra replied without sympathy. She gestured to her tactical team. "Get those civilians to medical facilities immediately. Full screening for vampire chip traces, psychological counseling, and indefinite protective custody until Millennium is neutralized. I won't have them targeted for revenge strikes." As medics began loading the rescued prisoners into ambulances, one of them, the young woman who'd first begged the rider for help, stopped beside the burning skeleton. She was wrapped in a shock blanket, trembling from trauma, but her eyes held gratitude that transcended terror. "Thank you," she whispered. "They were going to turn us into monsters. You saved us." The rider's hellfire dimmed to almost nothing, just faint blue flames flickering in his eye sockets. For a moment, Johnny Blaze's humanity pushed fully forward, speaking through Zarathos with uncharacteristic gentleness. "You're safe now," the rider said, his voice losing its demonic echo. No one will hurt you again. I promise." The woman nodded, tears streaming down her face, then allowed the medics to guide her toward the ambulances. Alucard watched the exchange with genuine interest. Well, the burning judge has a soft side. How utterly adorable. The vampire's smile turned contemplative. "You're not just vengeance, are you? There's something human trapped inside that flaming skull. Someone who actually cares about the innocent." "Johnny Blaze," the rider admitted, surprising everyone. "A human soul bound to Zarathos, the spirit of vengeance. We are one, but also two." The rider judges. Johnny remembers what it means to be saved." Anderson crossed himself reflexively. "Mother Mary, a human soul imprisoned within a demon. That's..." He trailed off, theology and horror warring in his expression. "That's damnation beyond anything the church has classified." "It's a weapon," Integra corrected pragmatically. "A weapon that Millennium just tested and failed to stop, which means they'll escalate." She pulled out a secure smartphone, already calling up intelligence reports. "We've identified 17 more potential Millennium facilities throughout London and the surrounding counties. If you want to hurt them before their invasion begins, these are your targets." The rider's hellfire reignited to full intensity as he studied the locations Integra displayed. Warehouses, abandoned buildings, even a disused underground station, all converted into freak production or storage facilities. Hundreds, possibly thousands of artificial vampires waiting for activation. "I will burn them all," the rider declared. "Every facility, every freak, every trace of Millennium's corruption will become ash." "Not tonight, you won't," Integra said firmly. "You've depleted your power reserves fighting the captain and maintaining those protective barriers. Even supernatural entities have limits." She gestured to the still smoldering warehouse ruins. "Millennium now knows your capabilities, your tactics, and your weaknesses. The next facility will be trapped specifically for you. You need rest, intelligence, and a strategic approach." "I do not tire. Your hellfire is currently at 40% intensity," Integra interrupted, proving she'd been carefully observing his power output. "When you first arrived, it burned hot enough to melt steel instantly. Now it's merely scorching concrete. You're running on reserves, and Millennium will exploit that if you attack tonight." The rider wanted to argue, but Johnny Blaze's consciousness recognized the truth. The spirit of vengeance was immortal and tireless, yes, but deploying maximum power continuously drained even Zarathos' reserves. And the extended battle with the captain, plus maintaining 12 protective barriers simultaneously, had cost more energy than usual. "Where would I rest?" the rider asked. The question itself an admission of weakness that Zarathos hated making. "Hellsing Manor has reinforced containment facilities," Integra offered. "Originally designed to hold Alucard during his regeneration cycles. Fireproof, blast-proof, and isolated from civilian populations. You can recharge without worrying about accidentally incinerating my staff." "How welcoming," Alucard commented. "She's offering you my bedroom. I'm almost jealous." Anderson's expression suggested he had thoughts about a demon resting in consecrated British soil, but pragmatism won out. "The Vatican has a safe house in East London. Blessed grounds, sanctified protections. You'd be uncomfortable there, demon, but protected from Millennium retaliation." The rider considered both options. Hellsing Manor meant proximity to intelligence assets and coordination with Alucard. Anderson's safe house meant blessed protections that would actually harm him, but also prevent Millennium from easily targeting him. Both had strategic value, or he could reject both and find his own refuge. The decision crystallized when the rider's supernatural senses detected something new on the wind. Not immediate threat, but a wrongness spreading through London's shadows. More vampires moving into position, more ghouls being deployed. Millennium wasn't retreating after tonight's losses. They were accelerating. The Major's 3-day timeline was accurate. The invasion was coming, fast. "I will accept Hellsing's offer," the rider announced. "But I will not be contained. I will rest, not be imprisoned." "Containment facilities can be opened from the inside," Integra assured him. "You're a guest, not a prisoner, though I expect you to refrain from burning my ancestral home." "I burn only the guilty," the rider repeated. Alucard's smile turned predatory. "Then let's hope none of Hellsing's staff have been naughty. Come along, Burning One. I'll show you to your accommodations. Try not to melt anything historically significant." As the Hellsing convoy prepared to depart, Anderson approached the rider one final time. The priest's blessed bayonets were sheathed now, his earlier hostility replaced by grudging acceptance. "We're not friends, demon," Anderson stated flatly. "But we share an enemy. The Nazis who mock God by creating undead abominations, and the Major who worships war as if it were divine." His expression hardened. "So I'll work with you, for now. But when Millennium falls..." He left the threat unspoken. "When Millennium falls," the rider replied, "you and I will settle what remains unsettled. Until then, priest, your blades and my fire serve the same purpose." Anderson nodded sharply, then disappeared into the shadows with the preternatural speed of a regenerator. The rider mounted his motorcycle, hellfire erupting from the exhaust in a controlled burst. The impossible machine roared to life, ready to follow Hellsing's convoy to whatever rest a spirit of vengeance could find in a world not his own. Somewhere in Millennium's hidden command center, the Major watched footage of the night's events with absolute delight. "Magnificent," he breathed. "Simply magnificent." Hellsing Manor rose from the English countryside like a monument to old money and older secrets. Gothic architecture merged with modern security systems, gargoyles that doubled as surveillance cameras, stained glass windows reinforced with bulletproof polymer, and grounds patrolled by soldiers who'd signed non-disclosure agreements backed by the Official Secrets Act. The rider's motorcycle left burning tire tracks across the manicured lawn as he followed Alucard's casual stride toward the manor's reinforced entrance. Hellsing staff scattered at their approach, some from trained caution, others from primal fear of the flaming skull that had invaded their sanctuary. "Try not to traumatize the help too badly," Alucard advised cheerfully. "Good servants are difficult to replace, and the current generation is already skittish after last month's ghoul incident." The rider didn't respond, his supernatural senses cataloging every detail of the manor. The building radiated age, centuries of accumulated history, bloodshed, and dark purpose. Hellsing had fought monsters for generations, and the walls themselves seemed stained with that legacy. But beneath the supernatural residue, the rider detected something else: protection. This place was designed to contain threats, yes, but also to shelter those who fought them. Integra met them in the main hall, having arrived ahead via helicopter. She'd traded her field attire for a more formal suit, though her posture remained military straight and her eyes never stopped calculating. "The containment chamber is in sub-level 3, she announced without preamble, originally constructed to hold Alucard during his regeneration periods after critical damage. The walls are reinforced concrete, laced with silver and blessed materials. Emergency sprinkler systems contain holy water. Exit protocols require biometric authorization or..." She glanced at the rider's hellfire. sufficient destructive force. "You built a cage," the rider observed, his tone disapproving. "I built a safeguard," Integra corrected. "Alucard is the most powerful vampire in existence, and even he requires containment measures. You're an unknown entity of comparable power. I'd be irresponsible not to take precautions." "She has a point," Alucard admitted. "I've destroyed this manor twice, once deliberately, once by accident. The insurance premiums are astronomical." His smile turned sharp. "But don't worry, Burning One. The containment measures are more psychological than practical. If you genuinely wanted to leave, blessed silver wouldn't stop you." The rider's skull tilted, processing the vampire's words. Alucard was right. The hellfire had melted blessed silver during the fight with Anderson. The containment chamber was a statement of caution, not a genuine prison. "I will rest in your chamber," the rider announced. "But understand, if I sense evil that requires judgment, no blessed walls will contain me." "Fair enough," Integra replied. "Walter, show our guest to sublevel 3. An elderly man in butler's attire appeared with unsettling silence, his white hair and dignified bearing at odds with the casual competence radiating from him. Walter C. Dornez, the Angel of Death, Hellsing's retired but still lethal retainer, bowed slightly to the rider. "This way, sir," Walter said with perfect courtesy, as if guiding a flaming skeleton to containment facilities was entirely routine. "I've prepared the chamber, according to Sir Integra's specifications. I trust you'll find it adequate." The rider followed the butler through corridors lined with portraits of previous Hellsing family heads. Each painting seemed to watch him pass, generations of vampire hunters observing the supernatural entity now walking their ancestral home. The descent to sublevel 3 took them past armories, medical facilities, and a massive library that Johnny Blaze's consciousness noticed with unexpected interest. The containment chamber was exactly as described. A reinforced cell with walls thick enough to withstand artillery, ventilation systems that could pump holy water or blessed gas, and a single heavy door marked with religious symbols from multiple faiths. But Walter had added touches that transformed the space from prison to sanctuary. A sturdy bench against one wall, indirect lighting that wouldn't interfere with the rider's hellfire, and surprisingly, a motorcycle stand. "I took the liberty of assuming you'd prefer to keep your vehicle close," Walter explained, gesturing to the stand. "The chamber can withstand considerable heat, but please refrain from extended hellfire emissions. The blessed silver in the walls becomes quite volatile when superheated." The rider studied the old butler with newfound respect. This human showed no fear, only professional courtesy and practical consideration. "You have faced monsters before." "I've killed monsters before," Walter corrected mildly. "Vampires, ghouls, and the occasional demon. Though I must admit, you're my first interdimensional spirit of vengeance." He produced a small device from his pocket. "This control will open the chamber door from the inside. The code changes daily, but I suspect you won't need it. Consider it a gesture of trust." The rider accepted the device, his skeletal fingers closing around it with surprising gentleness. "You are skilled, butler. Your hands have taken many lives. 57 vampires, 312 ghouls, and one traitor who sold Hellsing intelligence to a vampire cult," Walter recited without shame or boast. "I retired from active duty 10 years ago, but one never truly leaves this life. We simply find new ways to serve." "Are you guilty?" the rider asked, and for once the question carried curiosity rather than accusation. Walter considered the question with the same careful precision he applied to folding napkins. By some definition, certainly. I've killed without trial, without mercy, and occasionally without complete certainty of guilt. But I've also saved countless innocents and prevented atrocities that would have drowned London in blood. He met the rider's burning gaze directly. If you wish to judge me, I won't resist. But I would ask that you wait until after Millennium is destroyed. Hellsing needs every experienced hand. The rider's hellfire dimmed slightly. Johnny Blaze's consciousness recognizing the butler's pragmatic morality. Walter wasn't innocent, but he wasn't the kind of evil that demanded immediate judgment. He was a soldier who'd made hard choices in an impossible war. Your judgment is postponed, the rider declared. After Millennium burns, we will speak again. I look forward to it, Walter replied with complete sincerity. He bowed again and departed, leaving the rider alone in the containment chamber. The spirit of vengeance stood motionless for several minutes, processing the strange alliance he'd entered. Hellsing, an organization that weaponized monsters to fight monsters. Anderson, a priest who killed in God's name with genuine religious ecstasy. Integra, a human who commanded supernatural forces through sheer force of will and strategic brilliance. And Alucard, the vampire who'd enjoyed the Penance Stare. Johnny Blaze's consciousness pushed forward, seizing temporary control while Zarathos withdrew to conserve power. The hellfire dimmed to faint blue embers as the human soul examined their situation through mortal perspective. We're in another dimension, Johnny thought, his internal voice weary. Trapped here, fighting someone else's war. And we have no idea how to get home. The dimensional rift that had brought Ghost Rider to the Hellsing universe had closed completely. Johnny's memories of the transition were fragmented. One moment pursuing a soul trafficker through New Mexico, the next moment surrounded by vampires and ghouls in a world where the supernatural operated openly rather than hiding in shadows. But this millennium, Johnny continued thinking, they're experimenting with dimensional magic. The doctor's broadcast mentioned summoning reinforcements. Maybe they know how rifts work. Maybe we need to survive long enough to steal their research. A knock on the chamber door interrupted his thoughts. It's rude to brood alone, Alucard's voice called through the reinforced steel. Besides, I brought gifts. Well, gift singular, but it's a good one. Johnny, still maintaining control, used the device Walter had provided to open the door. Alucard stood in the corridor holding a book, its leather cover worn with age and use. Hellsing's occult library has several texts on dimensional theory, the vampire explained, offering the volume. I thought you might be interested in understanding why you're here. The doctor's summoning ritual went wrong, or perhaps right, depending on perspective. Either way, the metaphysics involved are fascinating. Johnny's skeletal hand accepted the book carefully, hellfire instinctively avoiding the aged pages. Why help me? Because you interest me, Alucard admitted with characteristic bluntness. I've existed for 5 centuries, and in that time I've fought countless enemies. Most are predictable. Heroes who believe in justice, villains who crave power, zealots who worship their causes. His crimson eyes gleamed behind orange-tinted glasses. But you're trapped between damnation and redemption, punishment and mercy. You burned 30 freaks without hesitation, then risked your existence to save 12 humans who'd never thank you. That's fascinating. I'm not a curiosity, Johnny replied, his voice carrying both human frustration and Zarathos's resentment. Everyone is a curiosity to someone who's lived long enough, Alucard countered. but that's not the only reason I'm helping. You see, I've been watching Millennium's preparations for decades. The Major, the Doctor, the Captain, they're building towards something unprecedented, a war that will consume this entire city. His smile faded, replaced by something almost serious. And I want to survive it. To do that, I need allies who can match the threats Millennium is preparing. You want to use me, Johnny stated. I want to fight alongside you, Alucard corrected. There's a difference. Using you would imply deception. I'm being entirely honest. You're powerful, I'm powerful, and Millennium has forces that could actually threaten us if deployed cleverly. Working together maximizes our survival chances and minimizes collateral damage. Johnny considered this. Zarathos's consciousness, withdrawn but still present, radiated suspicion of the vampire's motives. But Johnny's human pragmatism recognized the logic. Alucard had no reason to betray an ally who could potentially destroy him with hellfire. What does the book say about dimensional rifts? Johnny asked, accepting the implicit alliance. That they're catastrophically unstable and usually fatal to anyone caught in them, Alucard replied cheerfully. The fact that you survived suggests either tremendous luck or tremendous power. Possibly both. He leaned against the doorframe, relaxed despite the chamber's blessed protections. The Doctor's ritual was attempting to summon reinforcements from hell itself, traditional demons, not your Marvel variety. But dimensional coordinates are imprecise, and summoning magic tends to grab whatever's closest to the intended target. You were hunting something evil, wreathed in hellfire, and radiating supernatural power. The ritual mistook you for a demon and pulled you through. So getting back requires another rift, Johnny concluded. Or destroying the Doctor's summoning apparatus entirely, which would create a backlash rift to your origin point, Alucard suggested. Though that option has approximately a 60% chance of killing you in the process. The book is quite specific about backlash mortality rates. Johnny's grip on the book tightened. A way home. Dangerous, possibly fatal, but possible. Where is the Doctor's apparatus? He asked. That, Alucard said with a predatory smile, is the million-pound question. Millennium's primary base is hidden, protected by cult countermeasures and the Captain's reality-distorting presence. We've been searching for it for years. But you? His smile widened. You can sense evil, can't you? Track it across distances. If we get you close enough to Millennium's leadership, perhaps you could locate what we've been unable to find. It was a gambit, a dangerous one, but it aligned perfectly with both the writer's mission to punish Millennium and Johnny's desperate need to return home. When does the hunt begin? Johnny asked. Dawn, Alucard replied. Integra's intelligence network has identified a Millennium weapons depot in North London. Heavy defenses, senior leadership occasionally present for inspections. We'll raid it tomorrow, and you can demonstrate your tracking abilities. The vampire pushed off from the doorframe. Until then, rest. Read. Contemplate the existential horror of interdimensional displacement. Whatever helps you recharge. Alucard departed, leaving Johnny alone with the book on dimensional theory. The human soul within the spirit of vengeance settled onto the bench, carefully opening the ancient text. The words were archaic, written in mixture of Latin and obscure Germanic dialects. But Johnny's consciousness could interpret them through Zarathos's supernatural knowledge. The mechanics of dimensional rifts, the metaphysics of summoning, the catastrophic energies involved in tearing holes between realities, and buried in the technical details, a single sentence that made Johnny's hellfire flicker with renewed hope. closure of a dimensional rift creates an equal and opposite reaction, potentially allowing brief transit to the rift's origin point before collapse. A way home, if they could reach the doctor's apparatus, if they could destroy it properly, if Johnny could survive the backlash. Too many ifs, but more hope than he'd had since arriving in this damned dimension. Outside the containment chamber, in Hellsing Manor's main operations room, Integra studied satellite imagery of London while chain-smoking her way through mounting stress. The city looked normal from orbital perspective. Lights twinkling, traffic flowing, life continuing, as if supernatural war wasn't brewing beneath the surface. The burning entity accepted containment, she observed to Walter, who stood beside her with his usual perfect posture. Surprisingly cooperative for something that claims to judge all evil. He's not mindless destruction, Walter replied thoughtfully. There's intelligence behind that hellfire, strategy, and something almost noble. He could have burned through our forces to pursue Millennium independently. Instead, he accepted alliance, which means he's either smarter than he appears or desperate, Integra concluded. She crushed out her cigar with controlled violence. Either way, we have 72 hours until the Major's invasion begins. I want every Millennium facility in London mapped, prioritized by strategic value, and prepared for simultaneous assault. And if the burning entity proves uncontrollable? Walter asked. Integra's smile was cold as winter steel. Then we point him at the Major and let vengeance do what politics cannot. In Millennium's hidden command center, the Major watched recorded footage of the Rider's battle with the Captain. He'd watched it 17 times now, analyzing every movement, every tactical decision, every display of power. "Herr Doctor," the Major called out, his voice thick with anticipation. "How long until our surprise is ready?" The doctor's voice crackled through speakers, emanating from his hidden laboratory. "The modifications are proceeding ahead of schedule, Main Major. Your special project will be operational within 48 hours. Excellent." The Major's smile widened until it threatened to split his face. Let them believe they understand our capabilities. Let them think hellfire and holy weapons are sufficient. He gestured to the screen, showing the Rider wreathed in blue-white flame. We'll teach our interdimensional guest what true war looks like. Dawn broke over London with deceptive serenity. Golden light spreading across the Thames, commuters beginning their daily routines, pigeons squabbling over crumbs in Trafalgar Square. The city had no idea that beneath its veneer of normalcy, 3 separate supernatural forces were converging on a warehouse in North London that officially didn't exist. The Rider emerged from Hellsing Manor's containment chamber at first light, his hellfire burning at near full intensity after a night of regeneration. Zarathos had consumed the dimensional theory text, absorbing its knowledge while Johnny Blaze's consciousness planned their path home. The alliance with Hellsing was temporary, a means to an end. Destroy Millennium, reach the Doctor's apparatus, create a rift, and return to their own dimension. Simple, in theory. Integra met him in the armory, surrounded by tactical displays showing real-time surveillance of the target warehouse. The facility houses Millennium's Weapons Research Division, she briefed without preamble. Advanced munitions, experimental technology, and according to our intelligence, the Doctor himself occasionally visits for equipment testing. If you can sense his presence, we might finally track him to the primary base. The Rider's skull turned toward the displays, his supernatural senses reaching out through the digital imagery. Even from miles away, he could feel the wrongness emanating from the target location. Evil concentrated and purposeful. Scientists who'd abandoned humanity in pursuit of dark knowledge. guards who'd volunteered for monstrous transformation. All guilty, all deserving judgment. "I sense 20 artificial vampires," the rider reported, his voice layered with Zarathos's supernatural perception. "5 humans, scientists, corrupted by choice, and something else, something that defies my senses. Present but not present, there but not there." The warrant officer, Alucard identified, appearing from shadows with his usual theatrical timing. He'd traded his red coat for tactical black, though the change did nothing to diminish his predatory aura. First Lieutenant Schrodinger, a quantum vampire who exists in all possible states simultaneously until observed. Killing him is... The vampire's smile turned thoughtful. Complicated. "Can the burning entity's hellfire work on quantum superposition?" Integra asked clinically. "Only one way to find out," Alucard replied cheerfully. The assault team assembled in Hellsing's motor pool. 2 armored transports carrying tactical squads, an Alucard's customized Mercedes, and the rider's impossible motorcycle that made reality itself uncomfortable. Anderson had declined to participate. Section 13 was conducting their own raid on a Millennium blood bank in East London. But his absence felt deliberate. The Vatican wanted plausible deniability if this operation went catastrophically wrong. "Rules of engagement," Integra announced from her command vehicle, voice broadcast to all units. "Hellsing forces establish perimeter and evacuate any civilian presence. Alucard provides heavy assault support. The burning entity..." She paused, acknowledging the impossibility of commanding vengeance incarnate. "Does what he does best. Try not to level the entire neighborhood." The rider's only response was to rev his motorcycle, hellfire erupting from exhaust pipes as the engine roared with sounds that shouldn't exist in physical space. The convoy moved out, crossing London as morning traffic began its daily snarl. Civilians in cars adjacent to the rider's motorcycle veered away instinctively, their hindbrain recognizing predator even if their conscious minds couldn't process the flaming skull. Some took photographs. Most simply accelerated past, desperate to escape whatever their eyes insisted they weren't actually seeing. The warehouse district emerged through industrial sprawl, abandoned buildings from London's manufacturing past, now repurposed for darker industries. The target facility squatted between derelict factories, its exterior deliberately decrepit while surveillance systems and reinforced walls spoke of serious security. Hellsing forces deployed with military precision, establishing a 3-block perimeter and evacuating the handful of homeless squatters who'd taken shelter in nearby ruins. The rider's supernatural senses confirmed no innocent civilians remained within his strike range. Good. That made judgment simple. "Millennium knows we're here," Alucard observed, studying the warehouse with Predator's eyes. "They're not scrambling defenses or evacuating. They're waiting." "It's a trap," the rider stated, not asking. "Obviously," Alucard agreed. "The question is whether it's a trap designed to capture us, kill us, or simply delay us while they complete other objectives." His smile widened. "Only one way to find out." The rider didn't wait for further tactical discussion. His motorcycle launched forward, accelerating from 0 to impossible in less than a second. Hellfire traced his path across cracked pavement, burning tire tracks that would smolder for hours. The warehouse's reinforced door, steel plating over concrete, met the full force of Ghost Rider's momentum and exploded inward, torn from its hinges by supernatural collision. Inside, the warehouse was transformed into something between armory and laboratory. Weapons lined walls in organized rows, experimental firearms, rocket launchers modified with occult symbols, ammunition that glowed with sickly light. Scientists in white coats scrambled for exits, while freak vampires dropped from ceiling-mounted positions, fangs bared and claws extended. The rider's chain swept the room in a wide arc, hellfire trailing like a comet's tail. 3 freaks were caught mid-leap, the supernatural links wrapping around their bodies and burning. Not just flesh, the hellfire consumed their vampiric corruption, the technological chips enslaving them, the stolen immortality binding them to Millennium. Their screams held both agony and relief as the flames freed them from undead servitude. More freaks swarmed from side rooms and catwalks, moving with coordinated military precision. Unlike the disposable troops from previous encounters, these wore tactical armor and wielded weapons designed for supernatural combat, silver-coated blades, bullets blessed through perverted rituals, grenades containing holy water mixed with vampire blood. The rider met them head-on, hellfire blazing. His skeletal fists shattered vampire skulls. His chain decapitated 3 in one strike. When one freak managed to drive a blessed silver blade between his ribs, the rider simply grabbed the vampire's head and burned him from the inside out. Hellfire spreading through the artificial vampire's body like cancer consuming corrupted cells. Alucard entered through the shattered door with considerably more style, his twin Kasul and Jackal pistols roaring. Each shot was perfectly placed, hearts exploding, heads disintegrating, limbs severed with surgical precision. The vampire fought with the casual contempt of an apex predator playing with food, his shadows spreading across the warehouse floor to grab and crush freaks who tried flanking maneuvers. 20 freaks, you said. Alucard called to the rider while shooting 3 vampires without looking. I count 22. Someone can't do basic arithmetic. 2 arrived after my initial scan. The rider countered, his chain impaling a freak attempting to ambush from above. Your mockery is noted and ignored. How disappointing. I was hoping to get under your flaming skin. The battle lasted 6 minutes. When the last freak fell, torn apart by Alucard's shadows and set ablaze by the rider's hellfire, the warehouse fell silent except for crackling flames and settling debris. That's when the scientists attempted their escape. 5 humans in white coats racing toward a hidden exit at the warehouse's rear. The rider's supernatural senses locked onto them instantly, tracking their guilt like bloodhounds following scent. These weren't innocent workers coerced into Millennium service. These were volunteers, researchers who'd helped design the freak chips, who'd experimented on unwilling subjects, who'd celebrated each successful transformation into undead soldier. The rider's motorcycle roared across the warehouse, intercepting them before they reached the exit. He dismounted in a cascade of hellfire, skeletal form towering over the terrified scientists. Guilty, the rider declared, his voice echoing with supernatural authority. You created abominations. You enslaved souls. You tortured innocents in pursuit of dark knowledge. Face judgment. Wait! One scientist, a middle-aged man whose nameplate read Dr. Fisher, held up trembling hands. We were following orders. The major commanded, you volunteered. The rider interrupted, his empty eye sockets boring into Fisher's soul. I sense your joy when experiments succeeded, your pride in creating efficient killing machines. You are not victims. You are architects of atrocity. Dr. Fisher's face went pale as the rider's supernatural perception laid bare every hidden sin. Please, I have a family. So did your test subjects, the rider countered. I sense 17 subjects who died screaming during failed transformations, 9 who begged for death after successful transformations, 32 who were children taken from refugee camps and experimented upon because you considered them expendable. The other scientists backed away slowly, hoping to escape while the rider focused on Fisher. But hellfire spread across the floor, encircling all 5 in walls of judgment flame. No escape, no mercy, only vengeance. "Look into my eyes," the rider commanded. The Penance Stare activated on all 5 simultaneously. Zarathos's power stretching to judge multiple targets. Each scientist locked eyes with burning sockets, and each experienced every sin they'd committed, every scream they'd ignored, every death they'd caused, every life they'd destroyed in pursuit of Millennium's dark science. 3 collapsed immediately, minds shattered by the weight of their own evil. 2 remained standing, barely, their bodies convulsing as the Penance Stare forced them to experience decades of atrocity condensed into seconds. Then the hellfire consumed them, not instantly. The rider let them burn slowly, flames eating away flesh while keeping them conscious long enough to understand their punishment. Their screams echoed through the warehouse until finally, mercifully, they were reduced to ash. Alucard watched the execution with clinical interest. Brutal, effective, morally unambiguous given their crimes. But we needed at least one alive for interrogation. The rider turned, his hellfire still crackling with recent violence. Their guilt was absolute. Their judgment was deserved. I will not spare the guilty for convenience. Even if that guilty party knows where the doctor's primary laboratory is, Alucard pressed. Even if they could have provided coordinates to Millennium's main base, you prioritized vengeance over strategy. "I am vengeance," the rider stated flatly. "Strategy is your concern. Judgment is mine." Before Alucard could respond, the quantum distortion the rider had sensed earlier materialized. A teenage boy in Millennium uniform appeared between them, and his catboy features somehow making him look both harmless and deeply unsettling. First, Lieutenant Schrodinger smiled with innocent malice. "Guten Tag, gentlemen." The quantum vampire's voice carried unnatural cheer. "Quite the show. Very violent, most entertaining. The Major is thrilled with your performance." The rider's chain lashed out faster than thought, hellfire wreath links passing directly through Schrodinger's body without resistance. The catboy flickered, existing and not existing simultaneously. "Can't touch me," Schrodinger sang mockingly. "I am here and not here, everywhere and nowhere. I exist only when observed, and I choose not to be observed by your attacks." He tilted his head curiously. "Though I must admit, your hellfire is fascinating. What would happen if you managed to burn me while I'm in superposition? Would I burn in all possible states? Would only some versions of me burn? The Major and I have been debating the quantum mechanics." Alucard's Castle pistol appeared in his hand, aimed at Schrodinger's head. "Tell us where the doctor's laboratory is, Cat, or I'll test several theories about killing quantum entities." "You'll miss," Schrodinger replied confidently. "You always do. I'm only here to deliver a message anyway." His smile widened. "The Major says, 'Thank you for destroying our obsolete facilities. You've been most helpful in clearing out old inventory and unmotivated personnel. The real war begins tomorrow at midnight. London will burn. Not with your supernatural fire, Herr Rider, with good old-fashioned warfare, bombs, bullets, and approximately 3,000 freak vampires dropped onto the city in a single coordinated assault." The rider's hellfire blazed with renewed fury. "I will burn every freak, every Nazi, every last trace of Millennium." "I'm sure you'll try," Schrodinger agreed cheerfully. "But the Major has prepared something special for you. A weapon specifically designed to counter interdimensional spirits of vengeance. We've been reverse engineering dimensional magic, you see, learning how rifts work, how to open them." His grin turned sharp. How to close them permanently? Johnny Blaze's consciousness surged forward at those words, alarm overwhelming Zarathos's rage. A weapon that could close dimensional rifts? That could trap him in this universe forever? Where? The rider demanded, his voice carrying both Johnny's desperation and Zarathos's fury. Where is the doctor's laboratory? Where is the apparatus? Now that would be telling, Schrodinger replied, flickering in and out of existence playfully. But here's a hint. It's somewhere you've already been. Somewhere you burned. Somewhere you thought you'd destroyed completely. He began to fade. Gute Nacht, gentlemen. See you tomorrow when London falls. Or don't. Quantum uncertainty makes scheduling so difficult. The catboy vanished completely, leaving no trace of his presence beyond displaced air. The rider stood motionless, skeletal fists clenched with enough force to crack bone. Somewhere he'd already been. Somewhere he'd burned. That could be the East End alley, the warehouse where he'd fought the captain, or any of a dozen sites he'd attacked since arriving in this dimension. Millennium was playing games, and every hour wasted searching was an hour closer to their invasion. Alucard holstered his weapons, his earlier playfulness replaced by genuine concern. The Major is escalating. 3,000 freaks is more than double our previous intelligence estimates. That's not an attack, that's an apocalypse. Then we stop it, the rider declared. We burn every facility. We hunt every vampire. We can't, Alucard interrupted, his voice carrying rare seriousness. Even with your hellfire and my abilities, we can't be everywhere simultaneously. 3,000 freaks dropped across London in coordinated assault? Thousands will die before we can respond. Tens of thousands if the Major targets civilian centers. The rider's hellfire dimmed slightly as the tactical reality sank in. He was powerful, possibly more powerful than anything Hellsing had encountered. But he wasn't omnipresent. He couldn't burn every vampire in a citywide assault. He couldn't protect every innocent. He couldn't win this alone. What does Hellsing propose? The rider asked. The question itself an admission that vengeance needed strategy. We contact the Queen, Alucard replied. Mobilize the military, evacuate civilian centers, turn London into a kill zone where Millennium's freaks are outnumbered and outgunned. His smile returned, sharp and violent. And we three, you, me, and Anderson, hunt the leadership, kill the Major, destroy the doctor's apparatus. He behead Millennium while their forces are scattered across the city. It was a plan. Not a perfect plan. Civilians would still die, chaos would still reign. But it minimized casualties and maximized their chances of ending Millennium permanently. The rider's hellfire reignited to full intensity. I will burn the Major. I will destroy his apparatus, and I will return to my dimension, even if I must tear reality itself to do it. That's the spirit, Alucard approved. Let's go tell Integra her city is about to become a war zone. She hates when I deliver bad news, so this should be entertaining. As they departed the burning warehouse, neither noticed the surveillance camera hidden in the rubble, still functional, still transmitting to Millennium's command center. The Major watched them leave, his smile widening until it consumed his entire face. Perfect, he breathed. They're doing exactly what I predicted. Phase 3 can commence. The command center at Hellsing Manor had transformed into a war room of barely contained chaos. Maps of London were overlaid with projected freak deployment zones, military mobilization routes, and civilian evacuation corridors. The air crackled with tension as intelligence reports flowed in from every conceivable source. Some technological, some mystical, all confirming the same terrifying reality. Midnight. 3,000 artificial vampires dropped onto London in a single, coordinated invasion. Sir Integra Hellsing stood at the epicenter of the storm, her voice cutting through the noise with the sharpness of a scalpel. The Queen has authorized Operation Clean Sweep. Military forces will deploy at 2330, securing major population centers and establishing kill zones. All civilian underground facilities, tube stations, bunkers, basements are being converted to shelters. Walter, now wearing a tactical vest over his butler's attire, pointed to a map showing London's financial district. Millennium's primary target appears to be symbolic power centers: Parliament, Buckingham Palace, St. Paul's Cathedral. They want to tear down the icons of British identity. Let them try, Integra replied coldly. She turned to the rider, who stood apart from the human bustle, his hellfire casting flickering blue shadows across the walls. Your role is simple. Alucard and Anderson will accompany you. You hunt the Major and the Doctor. Find them. Destroy them. End this at the source. The rider's skull tilted, his empty eye sockets scanning the maps with supernatural perception. The cats said their apparatus is somewhere I have already been. A place I burned. A trick, Anderson stated, entering the war room with the Vatican's tactical liaison. The priest carried a silver cross the size of a broadsword, its edges sharpened to lethal points. Schrodinger's entire existence is deception. He'd send ye on a wild goose chase while the real threat is elsewhere. Perhaps, Alucard mused, appearing from shadows without his usual theatricality. His crimson eyes were serious, his posture that of a predator who'd finally scented worthy prey. But the Major does love his symbolism. He'd want the final confrontation somewhere meaningful, somewhere his victory would be most delicious. The rider's hellfire pulsed as Zarathos processed the variables, while Johnny Blaze's consciousness clawed for a solution. Somewhere he'd already been, somewhere he'd burned. The East End alley, his arrival point. The warehouse where he'd fought the captain, the laboratory he'd collapsed. All were possibilities, but none felt right. The Major wouldn't choose a battlefield based on the rider's convenience. He'd choose based on his own ideology, war for war's sake. Then it clicked. Not somewhere I burned, the rider realized, his voice cutting through the war room's noise. Somewhere war burned. Somewhere London itself burned. Integra's eyes widened behind her glasses. The Blitz sites. Millennium are Nazis. They'd want to revisit their greatest failure. Walter was already pulling up historical maps. The East End took the heaviest bombing during the Blitz, dozens of locations, but if they wanted symbolic resonance. His fingers flew across a keyboard, the overlaying historical damage maps with current infrastructure. St. Catherine Docks, heavily bombed in 1940, now partially rebuilt, but with extensive underground networks from the original warehouses. It's close to the Tower of London, another symbol of British power. And it's where I arrived, the rider confirmed. The dimensional rift opened there. The apparatus would resonate with the same metaphysical coordinates. Alucard's smile returned, sharp and anticipatory. So the doctor built his laboratory beneath the ashes of the Nazis' previous attempt to destroy London. How poetically grandiose. The Major would adore that. The decision was made with military efficiency. Integra coordinated the broader defense. Military forces would engage the freaks across London, while Hellsing and Section 13 provided supernatural support. But the decapitation strike would be handled by three entities who defied conventional warfare. The rider, Alucard, and Anderson departed Hellsing Manor as the sun set over London, painting the sky in hues of blood and fire. The city below them was evacuating, citizens fleeing to shelters as armored vehicles rolled through streets that would soon become battlefields. They traveled separately, but converged on St. Catherine docks as twilight deepened into night. The modern developments, luxury apartments and trendy restaurants, were empty now, evacuated on Hellsing's orders. But beneath the polished veneer, the rider's senses detected the same wrongness he'd felt upon arrival, concentrated and purposeful. 300 feet below us, the rider reported, his hellfire illuminating the shadows between buildings. A massive complex. I sense thousands of life signs. Not all vampire, some human. Prisoners, test subjects. Anderson's grip tightened on his silver cross. Then we save who we can and burn the rest. The entrance will be guarded, Alucard observed, drawing his pistols. The captain, likely. Possibly Zoran's mercenaries. Rip Van Winkle with her magic rifle, the major's personal guard. I will burn through them, the rider declared, mounting his hell cycle. Follow my path. Do not hesitate. The motorcycle roared to life, hellfire erupting in a conflagration that turned night into blue-white day. The rider didn't bother searching for hidden entrances. He created his own. His fist smashed through the pavement, hellfire melting asphalt and concrete until it revealed steel plating beneath. His chain followed, when the hellfire wreathed links cutting through reinforced metal like paper. Below, alarms screamed. The rider dropped into the darkness, landing in a corridor that stretched into impossible distances. The complex was vast, far larger than any building above ground should allow. Dimensional manipulation, the doctor's expertise, had expanded the space beyond physical limits. Millennium soldiers were waiting, not just freaks this time. True vampires, ancient, powerful, wearing uniforms from different eras of war. Some carried medieval weapons that glowed with cursed energy. Others wielded experimental firearms that hummed with dimensional instability. The rider met them with hellfire and chain, his movements a blur of supernatural violence. He didn't fight to disable. He fought to eradicate. Every strike burned, every impact incinerated. The vampires who'd survived centuries turned to ash in seconds, their ancient power meaningless against judgment incarnate. Alucard and Anderson followed in his wake, cleaning up survivors and guarding his flanks. The vampire fought with efficient brutality, his shadows consuming those the rider missed. The priest fought with holy fury, his blessed weapons carving through undead flesh, while scripture fell from his lips like battle hymns. They descended deeper, following the concentration of evil the rider sensed like a beacon. The corridors twisted in non-Euclidean ways, space itself distorted by the doctor's apparatus. Walls shifted, distances lied. At one junction, they found themselves back where they'd started, until the rider burned through the illusion with hellfire that consumed dimensional trickery. Schrodinger's work, Alucard identified. He's masking their location with quantum uncertainty. Uncertainty ends when I burn it, the rider growled, focusing his hellfire into a concentrated beam that tore through the shifting corridors. Reality screamed as he forced it back into conventional shape, burning away the quantum manipulations. The path cleared, revealing a massive blast door marked with occult symbols that pulsed with sickly light. Behind it, the rider sensed the apparatus and the major's triumphant presence. Anderson studied the symbols, his theological knowledge warring with the perversion before him. These are reverse blessings, inverted scripture. They're not keeping us out. They're keeping something in. The rider didn't hesitate. His chain smashed into the door, and hellfire meeting corrupted holy energy in a cataclysmic discharge that shook the entire complex. The symbols shattered, the door buckled, and they entered Millennium's inner sanctum. The chamber was a cathedral to madness. At its center stood the dimensional apparatus, a monstrous construct of technology and occult geometry, pulsing with energy stolen from rifts between worlds. Wires and pipes connected it to rows of glass tanks containing human bodies in various stages of transformation into freaks. The doctor stood at a control console, his back to them, as if their intrusion was expected. And at the far end of the chamber, on a throne made of melted-down religious artifacts, sat the Major. He clapped slowly, his round face beaming with genuine delight. Welcome, gentlemen. I'm so pleased you could make it to our grand finale." The rider's hellfire blazed, his chain coiling for a killing strike. "Your war ends now, Nazi. Your soul burns today." "Oh, I think not," the Major replied cheerfully. He gestured to the apparatus. "You see, Herr Rider, we've been studying you since you arrived. Your hellfire, your penance stare, your dimensional resonance." His smile widened. "And we've built a weapon specifically for you." The doctor pressed a sequence of controls. The apparatus hummed to life, energy focusing not on opening a rift, but on creating a localized field that made the rider's hellfire flicker uncertainly. "It's a dimensional anchor," the doctor explained with clinical pride. "It stabilizes reality in a 50-foot radius, preventing dimensional manipulation. Your hellfire draws power from between dimensions, yes? From the space where Zarathos exists, partially outside our reality. This field forces you fully into our dimension, cuts you off from your extra-dimensional power source." The rider felt it immediately, a draining sensation as if a vital connection had been severed. His hellfire dimmed, the blue-white flames fading to mere orange embers. For the first time, he felt limited, contained within pure physical reality. Alucard and Anderson stepped forward, positioning themselves between the rider and Millennium's leaders. "You didn't think we'd come alone, did you?" Alucard asked, his pistols aimed at the Major. "But of course not," the Major laughed. "That's why we prepared a proper reception." Doors around the chamber slid open. The captain emerged, fully transformed into his werewolf state, regeneration already healing wounds from their previous battle. Zoran Blitz followed, her scythe glowing with psychic energy. Rip Van Winkle took position on a catwalk, her magic rifle aimed. And dozens of true vampires, ancient, powerful, the core of Millennium strength, spread out to surround them. The Major spread his arms wide. This is what war should be. Not petty skirmishes, but glorious, final confrontation. All our forces against all of yours. Winner takes the world. Anderson hefted his silver cross. Then let the Lord's judgment begin. The battle that followed was apocalyptic. Alucard engaged the captain, two unstoppable forces colliding with enough violence to crack the chamber's reinforced walls. Anderson charged Zoran, blessed silver-meeting cursed scythe in showers of sparks. For the rider, despite his diminished hellfire, fought the true vampires with sheer superhuman strength and centuries of combat experience. But he was weakening. Without his full hellfire, he couldn't burn them instantly. They regenerated from wounds that would have incinerated them before. He was fighting an army with one hand tied behind his back. Johnny Blaze's consciousness screamed within him. "The apparatus! Destroy the apparatus!" The rider fought toward the central machine, chain and fists carving through vampires who threw themselves in his path. He was almost there when Rip Van Winkle's magic bullet struck him in the spine. The shot didn't just pierce, it warped reality around the impact point, trying to tear him apart through dimensional shear. The rider staggered, his skeletal structure cracking under forces that shouldn't exist. The Major watched with ecstatic fascination. Yes. Fight. Struggle. Show me what vengeance looks like when cornered. The rider reached the apparatus. His fist, still flickering with remnants of hellfire, smashed into the control console. The doctor screamed, rushing to stop him, but Anderson intercepted him with a bayonet through the heart. No. The feedback. The doctor gasped, dying. The apparatus overloaded, energy surging back through its systems. The dimensional anchor field flickered, then collapsed entirely. And the rider's hellfire returned in a cataclysmic explosion. Blue-white fire erupted from his skeletal form, burning brighter and hotter than ever before. The backlash from the destroyed apparatus had not just restored his connection, it had amplified it. The vampires closest to him vaporized instantly, and those further away ignited like torches. The rider turned his burning gaze to the Major. Look into my eyes. The Penance Stare activated at maximum power, fueled by rage, by desperation, by the amplified hellfire burning through the apparatus's energy. The Major didn't resist. He smiled as his eyes locked with the rider's. And the rider saw everything. Not just the Major's sins, not just the atrocities of Millennium. He saw the truth of the Major's existence. A man who'd witnessed the horror of war and fallen in love with it. A soul that had looked at humanity's capacity for destruction and said, "This is beautiful." A consciousness that worshipped conflict as the highest form of existence. The Penance Stare showed the Major every death he'd caused, every scream he'd orchestrated, every life he'd destroyed for his glorious war, and the Major laughed. Tears of joy streamed down his face as he experienced the full weight of his evil. Yes, this is what I wanted, to feel it all, every moment, every glorious, terrible moment. The rider recoiled, not from weakness, but from revelation. The Major wasn't damned against his will. He'd chosen damnation, embraced it, and found ecstasy in it. The Penance Stare didn't break him. It fulfilled him. Your judgment is meaningless to me. The Major gasped between ecstatic laughter. I have achieved exactly what I wanted. A war to end all wars, with me at its center. The hellfire should have consumed him. But something stayed the rider's hand. Not mercy, understanding. The Major wanted to die in his war. Giving him that death would be granting his wish. Alucard appeared beside the rider, with the captain's broken body dissolving into shadows behind him. He wants you to kill him. It's his final victory. I know, the rider replied. Anderson joined them, Zoran's head dangling from one hand. Then what do? We can't let him live. The rider's hellfire dimmed as Johnny Blaze's consciousness pushed forward with a solution. Not vengeance, not judgment. Something worse for a man who worshipped war. Your war ends, the rider announced to the Major. But you will not die in it. He focused his hellfire not on consuming, but on sealing. The flames wrapped around the Major, not burning, but containing, creating a prison of eternal fire that would never consume, only preserve. No, the Major whispered, his ecstasy turning to horror. No, you can't. I can, the rider declared. You will live, trapped, alone, with only your memories of war for company, forever. The hellfire crystallized, forming a burning sphere with the Major suspended at its center. His screams, not of pain, but of furious denial, echoed briefly before the sphere sealed completely, becoming a burning orb of eternal imprisonment. The remaining Millennium forces, seeing their leader defeated, broke. Some fought to the death. Others fled. Within minutes, the chamber fell silent except for the crackle of hellfire and the groaning of the overloaded apparatus. Alucard studied the burning sphere. Eternal imprisonment. That's crueler than killing him. He chose his damnation, the writer replied. I simply made it permanent. Anderson crossed himself. God have mercy on his soul. He doesn't want mercy, the writer stated. He wanted war. Now he has only its memory. The apparatus began to destabilize completely, energy building toward catastrophic explosion. The dimensional rifts it had created were collapsing, and the backlash would destroy the entire complex. Time to leave, Alucard stated. The rider mounted his hell cycle. The apparatus's collapse will create one final rift. I will use it to return home. Anderson nodded. Then go with God, demon, or whatever passes for God in your dimension. Alucard offered a mocking bow. It's been entertaining, Burning One. Try not to miss me too much. The rider revved his engine, hellfire roaring as he aimed toward the overloaded apparatus. The rift was already forming, a tear in reality that showed glimpses of his own dimension. New Mexico desert. Familiar stars. He glanced back once at the Hellsing universe, a world of monsters and miracles, of holy warriors and unholy alliances. Then he accelerated, the motorcycle launching into the rift as the apparatus exploded behind him. Reality tore, dimensions screamed, and Ghost Rider vanished from the Hellsing universe as London above burned with the last embers of Millennium's war. In the ashes of St. Catherine Docks, Sir Integra Hellsing surveyed the damage while Walter coordinated cleanup operations. Millennium was broken, its leadership destroyed or imprisoned. London had burned, but not fallen. The cost had been high, but the city would survive. Alucard watched the sunrise from a nearby rooftop, his thoughts uncharacteristically contemplative. The burning skeleton had been fascinating, a force of nature that defied categorization. Part demon, part angel, part human, he would miss the entertainment. Alexander Anderson returned to the Vatican, his report a mixture of theological crisis and tactical triumph. The church would debate for years what exactly the rider had been. But Anderson knew the truth, a weapon that could be aimed, but never controlled. And in a secure vault deep beneath Hellsing Manor, the burning sphere containing the Major sat on a pedestal, its eternal hellfire never dimming. Inside, the Nazi commander experienced every memory of his war on endless loop, his victory denied, his glorious death stolen. For a man who worshipped conflict, it was the perfect punishment. As for Ghost Rider, he returned to his own dimension, the rift collapsing behind him. The New Mexico desert was unchanged, the soul trafficker he'd been hunting long since fled. But Johnny Blaze carried something back with him, the memory of a world where evil wore uniforms and holiness came with bayonets. A world where the line between monster and hero was razor thin. The rider continued his endless hunt, punishing the guilty, burning the wicked. But sometimes, on quiet nights, the hellfire around his skull would burn a little bluer, in remembering a vampire who'd enjoyed judgment, a priest who'd fought with holy fury, and a war that had almost consumed a city. The multiverse had shifted. A spirit of vengeance had crossed dimensions and left his mark. And somewhere in the infinite tapestry of realities, new stories were already beginning.